Revelation by Braylee Parkinson. 1. Sylvia Wilcox dragged herself out of bed before the sun rose. Feeling utterly drained and unsure of what the next day would bring, she threw on some track pants, a bold red hoodie, and her trusty running shoes before braving the freezing yet pristine morning air. She took several deep breaths of the crisp cold air, her mind growing more alert and focused. It was mid-December in Michigan, and winter had taken hold, but she'd made it a personal goal to run every day that it wasn't actively snowing. As she jogged down the block, there was only one sound, a drab car idling a few houses down for her. She noticed the vehicle take off after she passed by. Catching her eye, the car sped up past her, briefly interrupted the fresh morning air, and turned left at the corner. The hum of the car faded away quickly. The rest of the neighborhood was quiet and still, and the introspective atmosphere quickly returned. Sylvia lived in a college town in southeastern Michigan. She'd fallen in love with the place during graduate school, and moved back after her husband bought her an old Victorian house she'd been in love with for years. Sadly, Derek had never lived in the house with her. He'd driven off the side of a dark road, and into a lake a few days after they'd agreed to reconcile their marriage. That was one reason she was so nervous about the commitment she'd made for the following day. Early the next morning, she was going to get on a plane and head to Utah, where she would spend the holidays with Brady Kepler. They dubbed it a buddy trip, but the implications that there was more between them were extremely strong. As a former tomboy, Sylvia was used to having male friends, but her relationship with Brady Kepler was unlike any other. She felt attracted to him and often thought about him. Clearly there was more going on between them, but Sylvia wasn't sure she wanted to take things further. She was a widow. Derek had been the love of her life. That season was over, wasn't it? Sylvia shifted her thought to her run, taking in the sights of her town. Ypsilanti is nothing more than a few blocks, but the historic buildings and neatly kept storefronts make it a gem. Christmas was 11 days away, and the season had taken hold of the tiny shopping area. Sparkling garland adorned the small-town storefronts and restaurants, with strings of lights draped around lampposts and small artificial trees. Seeing all the glittery cheer roused her from her state of serious contemplation. Braving the biting cold and picking up her pace, she found herself in a better mood. There was something about the frigid air that made her feel courageous and powerful. In those early morning hours, running through the empty streets, Sylvia felt like she could conquer whatever came her way. She ran through Riverside Park and Depot Town, then back up Cross Street before hitting Michigan Avenue and heading home. Along the way, she debated whether she should cancel her trip to Utah. By the time she reached the front door, she decided she couldn't cancel. She'd given her word that she'd be there, so she would show up and do her best to enjoy it without worrying about things that hadn't happened yet. Sylvia wasn't sure how she'd gotten herself into this situation, which she wasn't even sure was a situation. Perhaps she was overreacting and being too cautious. She'd taken a missing person case a few months back that had led to Utah. While there, she met Brady, and he'd helped her solve the case, assisting every step of the way. He'd been friendly and they'd clicked. When the case was over, they'd talked about taking a vacation. He wanted to show her around Utah's backcountry, maybe even take her skiing. People always say things like, "We should get together," or "Let's take a trip," etc. However, few mean it. Well, Brady meant it. Sylvia was back in Utah for a weekend over the summer, and Brady called a few months after that brief trip to tell her he'd booked a cabin in the Ogden River Valley. "Why don't you join me? We'll do some skiing and snowshoeing. Maybe have a couple of drinks and relax," Brady said. It sounded like a great idea at the time. Sylvia had told him she'd only come if she could pay half of the cabin fees. He agreed, and now she would leave for Utah in less than 24 hours. Initially she was excited, but the previous night she'd checked her voicemail and heard a terrifying but straightforward message. "Bring a nice dress. Something fancy. Short and to the point." No hint at why she'd need a fancy dress. Not sure what to make of it, Sylvia didn't call back. Instead, she sent a text message after contemplating how to respond. "Will do. A simple, emotionless text was all she could muster. Hopefully, it didn't convey how nervous she was. Sylvia had been obsessing over the message since receiving it. We were just friends. Why would she need a fancy dress? This was a buddy trip. They'd hang out and have a good time. There was no reason to think it was anything else. Sylvia had been a widow for 6 years now, and minus a few half-hearted dates, she hadn't considering connecting with a man in that way again. The idea of a relationship, or even a bit of romance, was terrifying. Part of this was because she'd never been much for dating. As a teen, she'd attended a boarding school in Connecticut, where she'd kept to herself mostly by choice. Sylvia went to one homecoming dance during her sophomore year. At the end of the night, her date said, "You're a nice girl, but you ask too many questions," and that was the sum total of her dating experience in high school. A lack of social connections had made dating virtually obsolete, and she'd carried that sentiment into adulthood. Sylvia was a bookish tomboy turned solitary woman. She'd gone on a few first dates in college, but no long-term relationships. Derek had been a childhood friend who'd known and loved her as the brave tomboy with the messy hair. They'd never officially dated, even though they spent most days in the years leading up to their marriage together. One day, Derek asked her to marry him. Her childhood crush proposed. It was one of those happily ever after events, but all that changed when Derek died. Now that Sylvia knew what it was like to be in love with someone and lose them, she wanted nothing to do with anything that resembled a relationship. Sylvia dedicated her life to her work as a private investigator, and she had made peace with that fact. Hopefully, Brady would understand if the subject of moving beyond friendship ever came up. It hadn't yet, so why was she worried about it? Shaking off the thoughts, recognizing that they had little basis in reality, her mind shifted. "Go out to Utah and have a blast with your new friend," she told herself. Back at home, she showered and grabbed coffee and a bowl of oatmeal before heading to the office. Martin showed up a few minutes after she arrived. After her husband Derek passed away, her brother-in-law stepped in to serve as her assistant. What had started as a way to mourn together gradually turned into a business partnership. "Big trip to Lover's Lane coming up tomorrow," Martin said, adding a few catcalls to the end of his statement. "Very funny," Sylvia said. "Listen, this is just a trip with a friend. Nothing else." "I'm kidding. Brady's a nice guy. I doubt he expects anything other than friendly banter and fun. It's a secluded cabin in the mountains. He either wants to kill me or date me." They shared a laugh. "That guy was definitely leaning towards the latter when we were in Utah." "You think I should cancel?" "No way. You've worked hard over the past few months. If anyone deserves a vacation, it's you. I just don't want any awkwardness." "Sylvia, there are more pressing questions to consider. Like, why take a vacation in the middle of December to a place that's colder and has more snow? You know me. Mysterious ways and all." "Yeah, so what I'm thinking is you might have some ulterior motives. I mean, single guy, single girl meeting up in the snow-covered mountains. Pretty sure I've seen this on one of those cable channels that shows sappy love movies. You watch too much TV. Get rid of that thing. I don't have people walking into my life to create a fairy tale. I have to live vicariously through television, while Princess Sylvia gets all the spoils." They giggled and went back and forth with banter for a few minutes. Martin was 15 years younger than Derek, and he'd once seemed like a son to Sylvia. Now he was more like a brother. As the years passed, he became more like Derek. Witty and sarcastic. Always quick with jokes. "You're right. Everyone needs a vacation. We've worked hard over the last few months, and the agency is doing so well now. Spending the next 2 weeks atop a mountain in Utah, far away from the office, is the best idea I've had in months. I think it has more to do with Prince Charming. He's a very kind and warm, and he has a beautiful spirit." "A beautiful spirit?" Martin scoffed. "That doesn't sound like something a PI would say about a guy. You were just encouraging me to go." "Yes, and I'm on board with you spending some time with Brady. I'm just saying that when you call someone a beautiful spirit, you might be exiting friend territory. But in all seriousness, Derek would want you to be happy. Martin's face turned serious. So do I. The mention of Derek caused a small wave of guilt to rise in Sylvia's stomach. Part of her felt like she was betraying her dead husband. Remember, we're just friends, says every woman before she falls head over heels for some dude. Martin. I'm kidding. Have fun. I'm sure that's all he's looking for. Martin winked and gave Sylvia a sly smile. You're right. Okay, let's talk about what I need you to take care of while I'm gone. First, make sure you check messages, both email and phone messages, daily. Next, if a potential new client comes in, do an intake, but clarify that we won't get back to them until after the new year. Syl, I've got this. I'm not a kid anymore. I promise I'll handle the office. I want you to go out there and have a good time. Okay? She looked at Martin, the man who she'd viewed as a boy when he started working for her 5 years ago. Her little brother-in-law was all grown up. He'd watched her enough to know what to do while she was gone. She tossed the notepad she'd been scribbling down instructions on into a desk drawer and sat down. You know what? You're right. Let's organize our paperwork and close up shop. We've worked hard over the past few months. Both of us should take this time to relax. In fact, why don't you stay at my place while I'm gone? That would be nice. A little staycation for me. Great. You up for taking me to the airport tomorrow? Now that I'll be able to soak up the spoils of Le Chateau Sylvia while you're gone, sure. 2. The following morning, Martin arrived at Sylvia's door promptly at 5:30. The temperature had dropped drastically overnight and showed no signs of warming up anytime soon. Frantically, they loaded her luggage into the back seat and hopped into the car. During the drive to the airport, she reminded Martin of the tasks he needed to take care of while she was away. Yes. I'll be stopping by the office daily to check messages and grab the mail. We've already been through this. Sorry. I'm just a little nervous about this trip. Also, even though you'll be checking that stuff, I want you to promise me you won't do any other work while I'm gone. Okay. We just busted our butts to get this agency back on track. Put your feet up. You need the rest as much as I do. I'll be taking it easy, but we don't want to miss anything, right? Remember, some people bring their sadness to our office around Christmas. True. I thought of Carson Stark, a widower who'd come to our office on Christmas Eve a few years ago, asking us to find out who killed his wife. But you're right. We both need a break. I'll stop by daily for the mail and to check messages, Martin said. Okay. Remember, staycation. Drink all Sylvia's wine, raid her fridge. Got it. That's the spirit, she said before grabbing her bags and heading into the airport. Holiday travelers packed the terminal. Sylvia made it through security and waited for boarding to begin. After settling into her seat on the plane, Sylvia started to worry about the trip. She couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in her stomach. The flight attendants droned on about safety procedures, but her mind was far away, preoccupied with thoughts of what this vacation would be like. As the plane taxied down the runway, she sighed and resigned herself to the fact that she was going to Utah. There was no backing out now. Sylvia tried to distract herself by flipping through the in-flight magazine, but every word blurred together into a meaningless jumble. Finally, she gave up and closed her eyes, trying to catch some much-needed rest before arriving in Salt Lake City. But sleep eluded her, and instead her mind kept wandering back to the office. She hoped Martin would stick to his promise of not overworking himself in her absence. The image of him buried under a mountain of paperwork while she was away sent shudders down her spine. The past few months had been nonstop at the agency. They'd taken on several cases we usually would have turned down. Most of them involved financial crimes, the type of cases she hated to take, but the cases paid well. It was always sad to realize that some people will do anything if the price was right, but Sylvia and Martin had solved several cases right from the comfort of the office. Financial cases were relatively safe, unless they involved enormous sums of money, and they were usually easier to solve than violent crimes or missing person cases. Now that they were back in the black and things were going well, they could be more selective. It was so reassuring to know that they'd start the new year off on firm financial footing. Feeling relieved, Sylvia closed her eyes and drifted off mid-flight. The plane landed just after noon. The valley was brown and dry, but the snow-capped mountains told a different story. When she first ventured to Utah earlier in the year, its beauty surprised her. It wasn't a place Sylvia thought she'd fall in love with, but there was a sense of excitement to be back in town. Feeling giddy, Sylvia bounced off the plane. It was exciting to be on vacation and have plans for the holidays. Since Derek's death, the time between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day had been one long string of lonely and sad days. Usually, she spent Christmas and New Year's sorting through paperwork. The last time she'd taken a vacation in December was the second Christmas after Derek died. By that time, Sylvia had started the private investigation agency, and the trip had filled her with stress and uncertainty over whether she could run her own agency. She'd gone to Montreal, where it was too cold to feel anything, even sadness. This year, things would be different. Sylvia gave herself a moment to take in the views from the valley, surrounded by mountains on all sides, before collecting her luggage. With her arrival in town, she felt at ease spending the next 14 days with Brady. Skiing, snowshoeing, trying new craft beers, and sharing a champagne toast to celebrate New Year's Eve were all on their itinerary for a fun-filled vacation. She liked the sound of all that. Sylvia had taken a day to get her hair braided before leaving for vacation. Her hair cascaded down just past her shoulders, and she had packed a fancy dress. Brady's text had mentioned bringing something nice, indicating there would be at least one formal event. It had been a long time since she'd been out anywhere, but admittedly, it would be nice to attend a dance or some other fancy event. The thought of getting dolled up caused the last bits of tension to disappear, and her shoulders relaxed. Sylvia picked up the Subaru she'd rented several weeks ago and headed for the interstate. After driving for 40 minutes, she left the highway and navigated through Ogden until she came to the road that twisted and turned its way up into the canyon. As she meandered around the snow-covered curves and bends, Sylvia watched the mountains inch up higher and higher. The canyon roads were frosty but easy enough to navigate if approached with caution. A few cars had failed to slow down, causing them to end up in snowbanks. Seeing that they were all being helped, she cruised past. The road led up toward the reservoir, where she made a sharp left turn and circled around the side of a mountain before heading deep into the Ogden River Valley. Signs prohibiting vehicles without chains or four-wheel drive lined the road. As Sylvia watched medium-sized front-wheel drive vehicles whip past, she concluded these warnings might be futile. The final climb to the cabin took her up a snow-covered, narrow road that haphazardly weaved along the side of a mountain and dead-ended on a ledge. The car cruised through the freshly plowed driveway, leading her to a cute cabin perched in a clearing above the parking area. Sylvia stepped out of the car and walked over to the cliff's edge. Standing there, looking out across a sea of white, she took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh mountain air, and closed her eyes. A frigid, soft wind blew over her face. "This is going to be good," Sylvia said before heading into the house. As Sylvia stepped into the cabin, she couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth and comfort. The spacious kitchen, cozy living room, and 4 bedrooms all added to the inviting atmosphere. She made her way down to the lower level and dropped her bags in one of the bedrooms, testing the mattress for a moment before exploring the rest of the cabin. The wood-grain floors and rustic log furniture added to its charm. Natural light poured in through skylights on the roof, even though it was a cloudy day. The back porch offered a stunning view of the valley with a hot tub for relaxation, while the front porch featured large wooden rocking chairs perfect for quiet mornings watching the snow fall or evenings spent sipping drinks by the fire. Sylvia envisioned quiet mornings spent, wrapped up in an afghan, sitting in a rocker sipping coffee and watching the snow fall, evening drinks in the hot tub or hot cocoa by the fireplace. The residence had a library full of novels, and a collection of movies in a cabinet by the large television mounted on the wall. She imagined a day stretched out on the wraparound couch, watching It's a Wonderful Life. Sylvia also planned to indulge in a day of lounging in bed, devouring book after book. As she walked towards the kitchen, she noticed a flyer sitting on the counter. She stopped to inspect it. The flyer was for a winter solstice ball at the lodge, a black tie and ballroom gown event. Sylvia smiled and picked up the paper. Was this why she'd been told to bring a fancy dress? Brady pushed the door open as she was standing in the kitchen, trying to sort out how she felt. "Hey, you made it," Sylvia said in a shy voice. "Sorry I'm late. The shop was busy today." "Good to see you," Brady said, lifting his hand in an awkward wave. Yes. Good to see you." Sylvia returned the raised hand greeting. She felt like Dr. Spock. Dressed in a flannel jacket, Brady's blonde hair fanned out around his shoulders. His sharp Nordic features came into clear view as he moved closer. "What you got there?" Brady walked over and reached for the flyer. You want to go to this?" Sylvia remained quiet. Not sure how to respond? "Okay. I know what that means." "What?" Sylvia asked in a thin, nervous voice. "We're going to dance. Haven't been to anything like that in a long while. I have my best suit with me. I just happen to have a dress or two in my suitcase. Someone told me to bring something fancy. Makes me wonder if this is part of a plan." Brady laughed before saying, "I may have stopped by to see the cabin last week and heard about a little dance they're having at the lodge." They locked eyes for a moment. "This place is perfect," Sylvia said. Changing the subject. "Hot tub, books, rocking chairs on the front porch, the works. It's also semi-stocked with goodies, but I have some groceries outside in the car. I thought you'd like it. You also have several bedrooms to choose from. I chose one in the basement." "Excellent. All right, let's see if we can get this party started," Brady said, heading over to the kitchen cabinets, opening and closing them until he got to the last set. "After your long journey, I bet you're in need of some of my famous hot chocolate. Here it is." He took out a canister of dark chocolate. "Now, I know you've been working a ton, so I want you to get comfortable. I'm cooking dinner, but first, a little something for the lady to enjoy." "I can help." "I know, but you're not. Go on now, have a seat," he said, shooing Sylvia away with his hand. Brady set up a series of pots, and began a rather involved process of preparing hot chocolate. He headed to the stove and poured skim milk in one pot and heavy cream in the other. She watched him whip up a cup of hot cocoa that would make any barista jealous. Whoa! That was intense. Nothing like hot cocoa with whipped cream on top. He handed Sylvia the cup and headed back to the kitchen. She watched him marinate 2 steaks in seasoning before putting them back in the refrigerator. "We'll let them sit for a couple of hours," Brady said as he sank into the opposite end of the oversized cream leather couch in the den. The cocoa was rich and creamy. "Thank you. This is fantastic. So what's new?" "My shop has had non-stop customers for the past few weeks. I'm so excited that I don't have to head in there for 2 weeks. But enough shop talk. I've got an idea." "Okay. I'm open. There's a tree and decorations in that closet over there. You know what that means? We have to decorate it, but on one condition." "What's that?" "We have to save some decorations for the trees outside. I mean, we're in a winter wonderland. It would be a shame to not have a live tree all done up." Brady laughed. "All right, but I need to have some say in this. I only consent to decorating the fake tree if we get to put it outside. We'll definitely save some for the real ones too." "That's actually a great idea. Let's find a spot." They played in the snow, tossing snowballs at each other before settling on a place a few feet from the cabin. In between the towering evergreens, they cleared a spot where we could put the tree. The snow was steadily falling. A steady snowfall spread soft powdery flakes all around. "We'd better hurry." It's starting to snow pretty hard, Sylvia said. No, there's no hurry for the next 2 weeks. We'll get started, and just come back to it later. You're right. There is no such thing as time. Sylvia and Brady put the tree together first, and then grabbed the plastic container with the bulbs and garland. Next, they strung lights around the cabin and placed ornaments on the medium-sized spruce out front. We might need more stuff, Brady said. Sylvia laughed and pointed at the decorations. I think this massive box of trinkets is more than enough. We'll see. Afterwards, they relaxed in the rocking chairs on the porch, observing the snow gently descending and admiring their accomplishments. As they sat on the porch, sipping hot chocolate and enjoying the peaceful scene before them, Sylvia couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment washing over her. The soft glow of the Christmas lights they had hung outside added a magical touch to the winter landscape, transforming the cabin into a cozy haven amidst the falling snow. Brady turned to Sylvia, a thoughtful expression on his face. You know, this feels like something out of a dream. I never imagined spending a winter holiday quite like this. Sylvia nodded in agreement, her eyes sparkling with joy. It truly is magical. Thank you for suggesting we decorate the trees outside as well. It looks so beautiful. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, reveling in the simple pleasure of each other's company and the serene beauty surrounding them. The world seemed to slow down around them, cocooning them in a bubble of peace and happiness. 3. Sylvia and Brady headed to the ski resort over the next few days, hitting the slopes and engaging in various activities. Neither one of them went skiing regularly, so on the first day they took a beginner's class. The following day, they began on the easy slope, surrounded by young children and other novice skiers. The snow was soft, providing a cushion for Sylvia when she fell. Brady would usually end up nearby, also tumbling to the ground, and they often found themselves at the base of the beginner's slope, laughing and playfully throwing snowballs at each other. With every passing day, their confidence on the slopes grew stronger. They graduated from the bunny slope and tackled more challenging runs, enjoying the rush of adrenaline as they flew down the mountain. The fresh mountain air filled their lungs with each inhale, rejuvenating them. Although they stumbled a few times, they brushed off the falls and cheered each other on to try again. As they conquered each run together, their friendship deepened, strengthened by the breathtaking scenery of snow-covered peaks all around them. The next afternoon, as they rode the chairlift up to the top of the mountain, Brady turned to Sylvia with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Race you to the bottom, he challenged, a playful smile tugging at his lips. Sylvia flashed a smile, eager to take up his challenge. The signal chimed, alerting them to the end of their ride on the chairlift. With an exhilarating whoop, Brady and Sylvia sped down the mountain, tumbling into a heap at the bottom. The following day was sunny and bright, perfect for snowshoeing. Despite the bustling town with holiday shoppers, they found a quiet spot. Focused on maintaining their balance on the snowshoes, they trekked through a place nicknamed the Bridges and into a nature preserve. Finally reaching the base of a mountain, they made their way back to the truck, where Sylvia's muscles were sore and exhausted from the journey. That's quite a workout, Sylvia said, ignoring the sharp pains she felt climbing into the vehicle. I think we need protein. How about a burger? Sure. I know the perfect place. Has a view and everything. The Aspen Cafe was a cozy mom-and-pop joint that looked out on the Ogden River. They ordered bacon cheeseburgers and fries, and laughed about how much pain they were in between bites while watching the thin stream of water push through river ice. Sylvia's phone rang as we pulled back up to the cabin. It was Martin. Hey kiddo. What's up? Does anyone have a key to your place besides me? Martin asked. No. Why? This is going to sound crazy, but I feel like someone has been in the house. Why do you think that? I put the mail down on the kitchen counter, and it looks like someone moved it. Martin was dramatic at times. Sylvia waited before responding. Okay. Anything else? The closet door in the hall wasn't closed all the way. The one between the kitchen and the living room? Yeah. That was strange. The closet door was hard to open. It would stick most of the time, and it needed a hard yank every time Sylvia opened it. That's odd, but I'm sure it's nothing. Make sure you use the alarm. Have you been setting it? No, but I've only really been at the office and here. I usually spend a few minutes there, but I'm right back here after that. Well, just set the alarm, even if it's a short trip, and you won't have to worry. I'm already worried. Someone was in here, he said, irritation rising in his voice. Martin, we're on vacation. Relax, watch some happy Christmas movies, and have whatever you want at Chateau de la Sylvia. Sylvia hoped she was calming his nerves. Instead, Martin let out a frustrated sigh. I'm sure you just forgot that you moved the mail or something like that. Try to relax, and call me tomorrow if anything else comes up. Okay? Yeah, Martin said before ending the call. Everything okay? Brady asked. Yeah. Martin thinks someone was in the house. I think he's just spooked about being there by himself. The next morning, Sylvia laid out her dress for the winter solstice dance before she headed to the resort. Short day on the slopes. We've got that big dance tonight, Brady said as they piled into his truck. Sylvia replied with a forced enthusiasm, her thoughts racing back to the disastrous homecoming dance from her high school days. Did she go to any other formal dances? She couldn't remember. The morning greeted them with unusual coldness, and a layer of freshly fallen snow coated the mountains. As they got ready for their day of skiing, Sylvia couldn't help but wonder how their evening at the dance would unfold. Would they actually dance? Or would they spend the whole time on the sidelines? Would Brady get antsy and want to leave early? And most importantly, would Sylvia be able to loosen up and enjoy herself? Throughout the day, she couldn't stop thinking about the dance. They started on a gentle slope before moving up to more challenging terrain. Sylvia was gradually getting the hang of it all, learning how to balance and lean forward at the right moments. She could finally make it down to the bottom of the mountain without falling. The rush of wind against her body as she sped down the slopes was invigorating. As she coasted down on her last run, Sylvia felt proud of herself until she heard a voice calling out. Hey, did you hear me? Brady called from a few feet away. Sorry, I didn't. What's up? Dance starts soon. Oh yeah. Guess we're done for the day, Sylvia said, feeling a bit of disappointment that we were leaving now. She'd just gotten comfortable skiing. They headed back to the cabin to get ready for the winter solstice dance. She'd hesitantly packed a beautiful gray dress that had emblems that resembled royal vestments embroidered onto the fabric. It was a long, flowing, sleeveless dress. Sylvia chided herself as she put on the gown and slipped into the matching shoes. The heels were higher than she was used to, making it challenging to walk, but the dress was undeniably gorgeous. This is definitely a date outfit, she thought to herself. She carefully zipped up the ballroom gown, reassuring herself that this was just a casual evening out with a friend. The fluttery feeling in her stomach was simply because of attending a social event, a common reaction for introverts like herself. Sylvia hadn't been to a formal event in quite some time. Standing in front of the full-length mirror, she couldn't help feeling anxious, but about what exactly? As she glanced over her outfit, she realized it had been years since she last wore a dress, let alone a ballroom gown. After adding a light dusting of powder to her cheeks, she felt as though she had stepped into a fairy tale. She awkwardly walked in her high heels towards the den. Brady looked impeccable in a gray suit, a light teal shirt, and shiny cowboy boots. Her cheeks flushed with warmth at the sight of him. You look beautiful, he said. His voice was low and quiet. Feeling slightly embarrassed, Sylvia said, "Oh, this old thing." They shared a laugh, before Brady walked over to her and held his elbow out for her to take. The ski lodge was alive and bustling with activity. Winter white decorations filled the hall, and a machine released snowflake confetti as couples entered. White tablecloths, small bags of pine cones, and all the fixings for s'mores, marshmallows, graham crackers, and chocolate decorated the tables as centerpieces. The glasses of wine seemed endless, and the steak tenderloin was flavorful. The early evening targeted an older crowd. Ballroom numbers played, and couples twirled around the dance floor. Brady and Sylvia spent that portion of the night sipping champagne and nibbling on cheese and hors d'oeuvres. Around 8, the music changed, and younger groups moved onto the floor. "Mademoiselle," Brady said, bowing and reaching for her hand. They made their way to the dance floor and stayed there for hours, laughing and swaying to the music. They sang along with the other partygoers and mingled with other couples who were also spending the holidays skiing. Sylvia wasn't a fan of big gatherings, but this one had the perfect vibe, relaxed, enjoyable, and comfortable. As the night wore on, the music slowed down, and the lights dimmed in the ballroom. Brady and Sylvia swayed to a soft melody, their bodies moving in sync with each other. Brady's hand rested gently on the small of Sylvia's back, sending a shiver down her spine. She looked up at him under the soft glow of the fairy lights hanging above them, his eyes filled with an intensity that she hadn't seen before. "Do you trust me?" he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. Sylvia hesitated for a moment, unsure of what he meant. But something in his gaze made her nod silently in response. Without another word, he led her off the dance floor and towards a set of double doors that seemed to lead to a secluded garden outside. As they stepped into the chilly night air, Sylvia saw a pathway lit with twinkling candles guiding them towards a beautiful gazebo covered in snow. Her heart raced as Brady took her hand and led her towards it. The soft crunch of snow beneath their feet added to the magic of the moment as they entered the gazebo. Inside, the air was crisp and filled with the scent of pine from nearby trees. "What is all of this?" Brady winked at Sylvia. "I have a few friends that work up here. I wanted us to have a special dance under the stars and snowflakes." Sylvia's eyes welled up with emotion. This trip felt like more than just a friendly excursion. She wasn't sure if she was prepared for it, but she definitely longed to be held in Brady's embrace. He pulled her closer, and they danced slowly in the intimate space of the gazebo. The soft glow of the fairy lights outside illuminated his face, casting shadows across his features that made her heart flutter. The music from the ballroom floated through the air, mixing with the gentle sound of the winter wind rustling through the trees. Sylvia felt completely enveloped in the moment's magic, as if time had slowed down just for them. Brady looked down at her with a warmth in his eyes that set her pulse racing. Without a word, he lifted her hand to his lips and placed a gentle kiss on her knuckles. Sylvia's breath caught in her throat as she met his gaze, feeling a rush of something unfamiliar yet exhilarating coursing through her. As they continued to dance in perfect harmony, Sylvia couldn't shake the feeling that this night was going to change everything. The connection between them seemed to crackle with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. Following the serene and tranquil dance in the snow-capped peaks, they made their way back to the reception hall. The night had a mystical aura, and as the clock struck midnight, they raised their glasses in a toast to welcome the first moments of the shortest day of the year. That night felt otherworldly. At midnight, there was a toast to the first minutes of the shortest day of the year. Forgetting about all her cares, Brady and Sylvia danced until 2, stumbling through the Charleston and ballroom dance steps. They laughed, drank, and were merry. Around 2:30, they climbed into the hotel shuttle and headed to the cabin. The small bus took slow, deliberate turns on the narrow, snow-covered roads. For a moment, it seemed like the vehicle wouldn't be able to reach the cabin, but the driver fought through the fresh powder and delivered them to the front door. "We've got to make the s'mores," Brady said as Sylvia fumbled with the code for the door. "Let's do it." They started a fire in the pit out back, grabbed some pokers, and unwrapped the s'mores centerpieces. That was quite a dance. "Seems like a lot for the winter solstice," Brady said. "I loved it. The solstice is special to me." "Really? Tell me more about the solstice thing. Sounds new age. Why?" "Not really. It's the shortest day of the year, and in the past I'd use it as a time to prepare for the new year. I haven't done that in at least a decade. I think of the new year as a fresh start, and the shortest day is a reminder. Memento mori." "What?" "Basically it means we all will die, so don't waste time." "That's not an exact translation, but that's the gist of it," Sylvia said. "That's a little morbid." Well, yes and no. Celebrating the winter solstice is something I started in high school. I went to a boarding school in Connecticut, and I'd always find an excuse to stay there over the holiday break. It was lonely and empty, except for a few instructors who had made teaching at Landon Academy their life. So I would take my meals with the professors and the handful of other students that were children of teachers, and I'd head back to my room. During winter break, I'd take the time to plan out all my goals for the next year. Connecticut is freezing in December, so I'd hunker down, eat a few microwave dinners on the actual holiday, and try to celebrate as best I could. The winter solstice doesn't have all those warm and fuzzy attributes like Christmas, so I'd make a deal out of it. It was kind of a special day. There was a deli right off campus, and I'd head there for a holiday meal. A prime rib sandwich and fries. I'd even splurge and have some type of pop, even though I knew it was bad and didn't drink it, but I splurged for the solstice. I'd only eat half of the sandwich and fries at the deli, saving the other half for the evening. Back in my room, I'd pull out the huge desk calendar my parents always sent at the beginning of December, and I'd fill it out. The entire thing. Yep. January through December 21st. That was like my New Year's Day. I did that until I was out of grad school. When Derek and I married, it became all about Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. He loved the entire season. Lights everywhere, the Christmas tree was up the day after Thanksgiving, the works. Once he was gone, the holidays went back to being this empty, painful time of year. I guess I just lost the drive for holiday traditions. So, you didn't go back to celebrating the solstice? No. I just let it all go. That's a shame. Traditions are good. They mean something. My parents kept things pretty mellow for holidays, but we always had a nice dinner, and me and my sister would have the obligatory fight over what we got for Christmas. Inevitably, she would want something that I'd received and vice versa. Looking back, it was a good time. I miss those days sometimes. You close to your family? Sometimes. What about you? Same here. It's just hard without my brother. He's been gone since we were 10. We're twins. There's no way my parents can see me without thinking of him. They're the perpetual grieving parents, and I'm the failed cop. I can't be in a room with them without thinking, I need to get the case file and dig into Simon's abduction until I find out what happened. Do you think there's a chance he's alive? Back in the 1980s, people were kidnapping kids and keeping them. You think something like that could have happened? On the days I miss him the most, I hope that's what happened. I hope that he's out there all messed up, working through therapy, watching my every move and trying to get better before he calls me up and says, "Hey, I'm alive." But in reality, that's almost impossible. I know how fast missing kid cases turn bad. The odds are not in Simon's favor. That's tough. Sorry that happened to your family, Brady said. Thank you. It destroyed our family. Sad, but maybe you could rebuild. You think so? Yeah. You and your parents are still alive. The three of you could build a new bond. If you're still alive, there's a chance, right? Sylvia nodded. Okay. This is getting too deep. Let's have more s'mores and move on to lighter topics. They filled their glasses with more champagne and talked until 4 in the morning. 4. The sound of Sylvia's phone buzzing on the nightstand jolted her awake. She sat up, grabbed the phone, and answered. This better be good, she muttered into the phone. Are you still asleep? Isn't it late there? There was a winter ball last night. We were up until 4 or so. Ah, I see. Sorry to bother you, but you'll want to know about this. What happened? Did the mail move again? She joked, expecting a laugh. It's not a game, Sylvia. Something's going down here. This morning you got a message from someone named Patricia Packard. It's written on the bottom of a receipt, and it was in the mailbox at the office. It was just dropped in the mailbox? What does it say? It's a complaint. Sylvia didn't remember the name, but it could have been a case she refused to take. Sometimes people complain. That's normal. Do you mind reading it to me? Dear Detective Wilcox, I am writing to complain about how you neglected my case. You failed to keep in touch with me or provide any information on what progress you made. I am contemplating reporting you to the state of Michigan, as you have committed fraud against me. She struggled to sit up in the bed, her head spinning a bit. Do you remember anyone named Patricia? I'm drawing a total blank. I don't remember the name either, Martin said. Patricia Packard. Doesn't ring a bell at all. The note arrived in the mail, but it wasn't mailed. Probably someone close. Right. So someone walked up to the box and stuck the thing in there. That's what it looks like. It's written on the bottom of a receipt. Sylvia thought for a moment. They wrote it on a receipt. Why? No clue. That's so odd. Who would do that? A person who doesn't write much, or maybe they write all the time. They don't keep notepads and paper around, so they'll write on everything. Derek used to do that. He was right. Derek was always scrawling something. He preferred notebooks, but if one wasn't available, he'd grab a small piece of paper or a receipt and jot down notes. Yeah. I remember that, Sylvia said, getting lost in nostalgia for a moment. Okay, so let's go through the actual wording of the note. Maybe we can pick up on something from the words that are used. Martin reread the note. Neglected, fraud, and I failed to keep them informed. I'm going to say this person doesn't like to take responsibility, Sylvia replied. Yeah. If we never contacted this person about the case, why didn't they follow up? Not that we would ever do that, but yeah. If the case was so important, why did they drop the ball? And the detective part really bothers me. I don't ever use that title anymore. It makes me think this isn't really about a case at all. This Patricia Packard is getting at something else. What's your theory? I think you made someone mad, and they're lashing out. This person knows calling you a detective and saying that you abandoned the case will bother you. Someone wants your attention. If she's a client, she knows I'm not a detective. It's in the contract. Maybe she didn't read the contract. Or maybe she never had one. Can you do me a favor? Sure. Look through our files and see if you can find anyone named Patricia, Patrice, or anything that even remotely sounds like that. Maybe I just have totally forgotten about this person. Okay. Anything else? Martin asked. Yeah, take a pic of the note and send it to me. Will do. I'll check the files now and get back to you soon. Sylvia climbed onto the bed and shut her eyes. After a couple of minutes, she got up again, putting on some pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. She could hear Brady rustling around in the kitchen. She waited a few more moments before going downstairs. In the kitchen, Brady was busy making breakfast, the delicious aroma of bacon and eggs wafting throughout the house. Morning. Thanks for making coffee, Sylvia said, grabbing a mug. Bacon and eggs will be ready soon. You're the best. You seem distracted. She sighed and said, Martin just called. Yeah? What's up? I got a note accusing me of fraud. This lady claims that I took her case and never got back to her. Brady shrugged. Complaining is the price of doing business, right? I don't recall the name. He flipped the bacon before looking up and saying, You aren't upset about this, are you? Vacation had been good so far. Sylvia hadn't given work one thought until now. I just want to get to the bottom of this. I'm sure you will. But leave it until after vacation. I know I shouldn't let it bother me. Someone sending me a complaint isn't a huge deal, but I would remember the name if things had gone that badly. It's handwritten, and someone placed the note, written on the bottom of a receipt, in the mailbox. They said I took the case and never got back to them. Now and then, I get a complaint at the shop. Don't let it weigh on you. But you remember the customers that complain, right? There's probably a little attitude or tenseness, but but I don't remember this name at all. Yeah, I usually know before they're out the door if they're going to complain. I can't recall anything to do with this at all. Sylvia peered out the large picture window, where she could see the snowflakes gently collecting on the glass. She desperately wanted to push the phone call with Martin out of her mind. I don't mind, Brady said. Don't mind what? If you get out your computer and start sleuthing. I know you won't be able to have a good time until you find out who this person is. Okay. If you insist, Sylvia said, getting up from the table, heading to the bedroom and grabbing her laptop. Setting up at the high-top marble table in the kitchen, she got to work. Brady poured another cup of coffee for her, before joining her on the opposite side of the table. She glanced up, a puzzled expression on her face. You don't get to have all the fun. What do you mean? I mean, I'm helping. Let's talk through it. There's not much, but there's always more than we think. Let's look at everything. Okay. Sounds like a plan. First, the note arrived today, December 21st. A day that's kind of special to you. Yes, and typically I close my office for the final 3 weeks of the year. Sometimes I end up visiting to finish up any necessary paperwork, but it's technically closed. The holiday season is tough, because Derek was always so fond of that time of year. I struggled to stay fully engaged at the end of the year, so I take that time off. So, if it was someone who was familiar with you, they wouldn't have sent you anything right now, because they know you like to be away from the office at the end of the year. Yeah, if it were someone I knew, they would have sent it before Thanksgiving or after New Year's. Unless they know me well enough to know that I will be in the office unofficially during that time. So you think this is someone you know? Maybe. Not sure yet? What else? Martin read the note to me. He's going to send a picture, but the person called me a detective. Isn't that what you are? No. I'm no longer a detective. I'm a private investigator, which means I lack the authority of a police detective. I bet most people don't know that. They do if I work a case for them. It's in my contract. I even highlight it in yellow, so they don't miss that fact. I make that point clear. Maybe they forgot. Or maybe they're mocking me. Sometimes I feel like a hack. A real detective works on an organized police force, and they have power. Other times I feel guilty. My solve rate is decent. Shouldn't I be using it for the greater good? Who knows you feel this way? I haven't voiced it to many people. If this is someone you know, why would they reach out now? And why use a fake name? I would remember the name or something about the case. Patricia Packard doesn't ring a bell at all. I'll be back, I said, grabbing my phone and heading to the bedroom. I called my old friend and former colleague, Charles Kettering. We'd been friends since childhood, lost touch when I went away to high school, and met back up when I became a cop. Sylvia. I'm glad you called, his voice sounded far away. Yeah? What's up? You sitting down? Just tell me. Internal Affairs might have something. Sylvia hadn't taken Charles's advice about sitting down. Shocked, she dropped down onto the bed. I'm surprised Internal Affairs would look into Derek's death after all this time. Tell me more. What do they have? I'm not sure, but there's a low-key buzz around the station that they're getting close to having proof of what we all know happened. I wasn't going to tell you, but since you called, I felt like it was right to say something. The authorities technically listed Derek's death as undetermined. Still, Charles and Sylvia and several other officers knew he'd been murdered. It was one of those sad cases where several people knew what had happened, but there wasn't enough proof. The other problem was that the 3 men responsible for Derek's death were police officers. Thanks for telling me. I won't get my hopes up, but keep me posted. I will. What's going on with you? It almost seems silly bringing this up now, after what you just told me. But I got a note at the office from some lady who accused me of fraud. Her name is Patricia Packard, and she claims I abandoned her case. The note is handwritten, and it states that I never followed up. She called me a detective, which made me think she might have been from my days at the precinct. She wouldn't be suing you personally if it was from back then. Right, but maybe she's just trying to get under my skin. Sadly, I don't remember the name. Can you check it out for me? Just a basic check to see if I had a run-in with her. Yeah. I'll check it out and stop by tonight. Actually, you can't stop by. I'm in Utah. What are you doing in Utah? I'm having a little holiday vacation. Why Utah? A friend invited me. I see. Would that friend be that guy who helped out on the case you worked earlier this year? He's just a friend, and yes, his name is Brady. I'll stay tuned for more on that later. In the meantime, and I know you're not going to listen, but forget about this craziness. Enjoy your trip. I'll run a check on the name and see what I can find. Relax and have fun. I will. Sylvia? As soon as I find out who this lady is, I'll be back in vacation mode. 5. Martin's message contained a photo of a crumpled receipt with neatly written cursive in black ink. Sylvia didn't recognize the handwriting and immediately searched for Patricia Packard in Michigan. Finding no results, she tried different name combinations such as Patrick Packard or Patrice Packard, but all turned up empty. Feeling frustrated, she closed her eyes and tried to recall any memories that could be connected to this mysterious name. What was she forgetting? This will still be going on when you get back home. Let's enjoy the evening, Brady said, reaching for my laptop. She instinctively moved it out of his grasp. I hate not knowing when I messed up. So do I. But what if you didn't mess up? What if this is nothing? There was a chance that this was all smoke and mirrors. But Sylvia needed to know what was going on. I hope that's the case. There's only one case I didn't follow through on. You think this might be it? Well, no. But maybe. I guess it could be my brother. Brady waited a moment, giving me a few seconds to sit with that thought. That wasn't your case. I was a cop. He was my brother. If any case was mine, that was it. I owe him. How do you think this is related to your brother? Sylvia took a moment, working hard to be as logical as possible. Finally she said, it's not. I just got off track. Maybe even wishful thinking. Is there anyone else who you can think of that might be angry with you? I'm thinking of someone older because of the name. Packard used to make a car called the Patrician. Makes me think someone may have named their kid that a long time ago. She'd be a grandma by now, Brady said. An older lady. I haven't had many elderly clients. Wait. You might have something there. I took a case a few years ago and there was a lady who, well, let's just say she was cold and calculating. Dangerous. And she liked cars. Sounds like a good lead. How long ago was that? It's been years. It was the second year I had the agency. I still talk with the client from time to time. She wasn't a sinister lady, but she might be playing a game with me. She's a well-to-do woman who is used to getting her way. If it's her, this is a riddle of some sort. I'll call the client and see what I can find out. Carson Stark had hired Sylvia to work on a cold case murder. The outcome had been unexpected and not something that could be brought to trial. Despite this, they remained in touch, meeting up for drinks occasionally and exchanging messages every few months. When she called him, Sylvia was careful not to cause him any distress. She had her suspicions, but didn't want to reveal them without a clear motive. Hey, it's been a while. How are you doing, Sylvia? Carson answered on the second ring. I'm good, thanks. And how are your kids? Danica is thriving in college, but she can be quite a handful. The younger ones are growing up fast and things are going well. That's great to hear. By the way, I received a note from someone named Patricia Packard. Do you know who that could be? That's strange. Is that why you called me? Sylvia let out a deep sigh. Carson, I'm sorry. But I have to ask. He was silent for a few minutes. You think? No. It's not her. She's actually not well. Her mind seems to be going. There's a nurse at the house, 24 hours a day. The tension was thick. Sylvia felt guilty for bringing up such a painful issue. I'm sorry to hear that. Please forgive me for bringing this up, but I have to keep my eyes open. Of course. Anything you need, okay? Thanks, Carson. Hey, I'm out in Utah right now, but let's grab a beer when I'm back in town. That would be great. We'll meet up after the holidays. She headed back downstairs. Did you find anything? It's not her. As I was speaking with him, I began to suspect one of my ex-colleagues. Are you serious? They're capable of anything. They killed Derek. How is the note connected? Do you really think they are coming after you? I know what happened, so I'm a threat. I don't think we have anything to worry about here, but I'm worried about Martin being at my place. You think these crooked cops were at your place? I don't know. Martin was freaked out about the mail and the closet door. I should have listened. Well, now that you know something more might be going on, you're taking it seriously. You think they'll go after Martin? Yes. They're crafty. Derek's death was staged well. The original speculation was that he drove off into a river and drowned, but there wasn't any water in his lungs. He'd been working undercover with some other cops. They were all taking money off the top of gang funds, including Derek. Since we were separated at the time, I didn't find out until after he died. Long story short, we worked things out, and Derek knew he'd have to be honest about things. He was going to go to internal affairs and tell them what was going on. The other cops got wind of it and set him up. They won't hesitate to hurt Martin. You think they're coming after you? They might do it in a roundabout way. One of them, a cop named Foster, is a shady character. He would probably just kill me and make it look like an accident. But another guy, Williamson, he's less aggressive. He might try to lead me somewhere and get rid of me. Why now? My friend Charles told me that internal affairs might have something. I didn't go to internal affairs because I don't trust them. There's one guy there, Cal, who I think might care, but he's not the head honcho. Also, I doubt the 3 cops will be charged and held accountable. I think I know what happened, but I can't prove it. But now that internal affairs is actually looking into Derek's death, I think someone out there must have evidence. When's the last time you heard something about the killers? It's been years, but my friend Charles still works at the same precinct. I see him all the time, and he tells me they're all riding high these days, boats, fancy houses, and fast cars. Everyone knows something is going on, but without solid evidence, it doesn't matter. It's also tough to be a cop who stands up against corruption within the precinct. People look at you like you're a traitor. Sometimes it means backup isn't coming when you're in a terrible situation. It can cost you your life. That's disturbing. Do you think we're safe here? Sylvia thought for a moment. Would they follow her to Utah? I think we're safe, but Martin is at my place. I might have to. Sylvia trailed off without finishing her statement. You might have to go home early, Brady said, his voice full of disappointment. That's a possibility. I'm going to call Martin and tell him he shouldn't stay at my place any longer. 6. Sylvia was hesitant to share the details with Martin until she had all the information. However, she knew she needed to get him out of the house as soon as possible. What if someone had indeed moved the mail? She made a phone call to him that evening, trying to catch him before it was too late. I think you should go home, just in case something is going on. Martin's voice was laced with suspicion as he demanded, What are you keeping from me? Nothing. I'm just saying that you might be right, and with this strange note showing up the next day, it's better to be safe than sorry. Sylvia, I know there's more to this. It's simple. I don't want you to get hurt. Especially on account of me. Please. Let's just be safe. There was a brief moment of silence before Martin finally spoke up. Okay, but you better fill me in on all the details when you get back. Of course. All right, Martin said. I was just about to call you. I've gone through the files. No Patricia or Patrice. I figured as much. Let's consider that this might not be a past client. I think it's probably related to a case we had before, but the person that sent the note isn't the person who hired us. Could be a relative who just wasn't happy with the outcome. Perhaps. Martin agreed. Charles is looking into things for me, but until we know more, head back to your place, okay? Will do. I'll lock up and head home. Hey, before you go, have you noticed anything else? Like maybe someone following you, or something like that? Nope. Things have been pretty quiet. Okay. Be careful. I don't know what's going on, but I think the note is connected. Just get out of there, and I'll call you when I get home. Sylvia returned to the living room, where Brady was calmly lounging on the couch. I apologize for all of this, she stated. It's no problem. How do you feel about going into town and getting some dinner? We can discuss our plans for tomorrow and decide on our menu for Christmas Eve. It's already the 21st. We should get everything we need before it's all sold out. Good point. So we'll grab dinner, map out the next 2 days, and then go to the store. Does that sound like a plan? Definitely, Sylvia replied. Her thoughts were still elsewhere. They drove down to Ogden and had dinner at a restaurant modeled after an Italian villa. Brady took a bite of his lasagna and asked, "Which activity sounds good to you? Skiing, snowshoeing, or ice skating?" Sylvia twirled her fork in the pasta on her plate as she thought. Maybe snowshoeing, she finally answered. Your heart isn't really in this, is it? Brady said. I'm a little distracted, but I'm having a great time. This pasta is fantastic. It is, but I know your mind is occupied. I'm just nervous about what's going on. Martin says he's going to head home, but what if someone shows up before he leaves? What if he takes his time gathering his stuff and ends up coming face to face with some disgruntled former client? I'm sure he's going to take off. Besides, I bet this former client is not very tough. They're making grievances through letters. That's pretty passive-aggressive. What if this is all a part of a plan? The men responsible for Derek's death set it up to look like he died either en route to my house. They know where I live. It's been years. Do you really think they're that eager to get to you? Sylvia shrugged her shoulders. I just hope it's not Foster. He's cold-hearted. If it's the crooked cops, I think they would have made their move by now. Look, this is going to drive you crazy. What do you think about this? If Martin calls and tells you that he's at home safe, and if your buddy Charles can't find anything about Patricia Packard in his police scan or whatever he's doing, you'll let this go and we'll enjoy the rest of the vacation. Once you're back in Michigan, you can call me every night and we'll work through the details and find out who this lady is. Deal? Sylvia twisted another bite of pasta around her fork and thought about it. Martin was smart and capable. He'd be careful and go home like he said he would, and Michigan was a long way away. Sylvia hadn't had a proper vacation in years, and even though it bothered her, Brady was right. A note wasn't an aggressive way to make contact. Okay. It's a deal. I'll let this go for a while if nothing comes up. The next morning, Charles called Sylvia. I couldn't find anything on Patricia Packard. I'm going to be working some overtime for the next few days. I'll keep my ear to the ground. Thanks. Are you working on Christmas? Nope. I've got it off, but I'm working today and tomorrow, so I promise to look into things, but only if you agree to let this go for a few days. Sylvia knew Charles would help her regardless of what she did, but he was right. She needed to set it aside for a few days and enjoy Brady's company. You have my word. I'm going to spend the next few days relaxing and not thinking about this. Promise? Yeah. It's a note. Nothing major, and Martin sent me a text that he's back at his place, so everything is sorted for now. That's the spirit. Now go to the mountain and head down the slopes a few times for me, Charles said. That day, Sylvia and Brady spent time snowboarding and headed back to the cabin around 2. Around 6, they drove down to Ogden and walked through Christmas Village, a section of downtown that was decorated with lights and cute tiny cottages modeled after Santa Claus's home in the North Pole. Children squealed in delight and ran through the frigid scene. A long line snaked through the display as children waited to visit Santa. As they walked through the bustling festivities, Brady and Sylvia purchased hot chocolate from a nearby cart, which helped warm their bodies in the chilly weather. They took breaks throughout their stroll to admire the intricate Christmas light displays, huddling together for warmth as the temperature hovered just below freezing. In the distance, a man played a festive tune on his fiddle. The overall atmosphere was merry and lively, yet there was also a sense of tranquility and peace. Sylvia felt her heart fill with holiday cheer as they continued their magical night. They paused to watch a group of carolers singing classic Christmas tunes, their voices harmonizing beautifully in the crisp winter air. Sylvia found herself humming along, the melodies stirring up memories of Christmases past. She felt a sense of warmth and contentment settling in, pushing away the worries and doubts that had been nagging at her. As they wandered through the twinkling lights and festive decorations, Brady suddenly stopped in front of a small shop selling handmade ornaments and trinkets. "Hey, let's get something to remember this trip," Brady suggested, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Sylvia smiled, feeling grateful for his presence and the joy he brought into her life. Together they picked out a delicate glass ornament shaped like a snowflake, its intricate patterns catching the colorful lights. It would be a perfect addition to their Christmas tree back home. As they made their way back to the cabin, arm in arm, Sylvia felt a sense of peace wash over her. Back at the cabin, they got the fireplace going and snuggled under blankets and talked until midnight. That night, as Sylvia headed off to bed, she was completely content and had almost forgotten about the note. The next evening they ventured back to the city. Christmas shopping was in full swing. The streets were bustling with shoppers, each person carrying bags filled with gifts and holiday cheer. Sylvia and Brady wandered through the city, taking in the festive decorations and twinkling lights that adorned every storefront. The air was filled with the sounds of Christmas music and laughter, creating a joyful and lively atmosphere. They explored quaint boutiques and specialty shops, searching for the perfect gifts for their loved ones. Sylvia couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement as she picked out thoughtful presents, imagining the smiles they would bring on Christmas morning. Brady was by her side, offering his opinion and sharing in her joy as they navigated through the crowded streets. As they walked hand in hand, Sylvia's worries from before seemed to melt away in the glow of the holiday spirit surrounding her. The note and the mysterious Patricia Packard had faded into the background, replaced by the simple pleasure of being with someone she cared about during this magical time of year. Snowflakes the size of quarters were falling consistently, covering everything in sight. As they walked arm in arm, Sylvia and Brady took in the picturesque Main Street that seemed to transport them back in time to small-town America in the early 20th century. Angle parking and old, well-kept buildings lined the street. They decided to stop at a restaurant that was mid-block. The door led to a staircase that took them to the building's basement. Brady turned and said, "Santiago's used to be a speakeasy." "Really?" "Yep. This was the red light district of Ogden. You could get anything you wanted on this street." "Never thought of Utah as having a wild side." "Well, it did. This was a true railroad town. Couldn't keep the riff-raff out." "Fascinating. So Ogden doesn't have a squeaky clean reputation?" "Oh, this was the Wild West. Make no mistake. Santiago's was eclectic. The menu touted the fact that 90% of the food on their menu was sourced from local businesses. After dinner, Brady drove around town, showing Sylvia where he grew up and taking her on a chilly walk around the campus of the high school he graduated from. Along the way, he told her stories of his childhood, often falling into a nostalgic sing-song voice. She found herself getting lost in the sweet tales from his childhood. Returning to the cabin just after 8 that evening, they started up the fireplace again, popped popcorn, and watched Miracle on 34th Street. 7. Sylvia and Brady cooked a dinner of prime rib, mashed potatoes, kale salad, and apple pie on Christmas Eve. The savory aroma of the prime rib filled the kitchen as Sylvia and Brady worked together, seamlessly moving around each other in perfect harmony. The mashed potatoes were creamy and decadent, the kale salad was dressed to perfection, and the apple pie bubbled away in the oven, its sweet fragrance mingling with the savory scents of the main course. As they sat down at the table together, the soft glow of candlelight flickering across their faces, Sylvia felt a deep sense of gratitude for this moment of peace and happiness. "I'll say a prayer," Sylvia said softly. Brady nodded and waited for her to pray over the food. After she was done, they began to devour the feast, savoring each bite. Sylvia knew this Christmas Eve would be one they would remember for years to come. As they shared bites and sips of huckleberry wine, laughter and conversation filled the air. Later that evening, they settled in for a movie marathon, watching one classic Christmas film after another, until they eventually dozed off on the couch. The next morning, Christmas dawned with a fresh blanket of snow on the mountains and whiteout conditions. Sylvia woke up to the soft sound of snow falling outside, blanketing everything in a pristine white. She stretched and smiled, feeling a sense of childlike wonder at the magical scene before her. Glancing over at Brady, still asleep, with a peaceful expression on his face, she quietly got up and tiptoed to the window. The world outside was transformed into a winter wonderland, the snow covering the trees and rooftops in a soft embrace. Sylvia couldn't resist the urge to go outside and experience it firsthand. She quickly bundled up in her warmest winter gear, grabbed her boots and gloves, and headed out into the snowy landscape. As she stepped outside, the cold air filled her lungs and she felt invigorated. The snow crunched beneath her boots as she made her way through the garden, leaving small footprints behind her. She twirled around, arms outstretched, laughing as snowflakes landed on her nose and cheeks. Brady sliced up chunks of the prime rib and whipped up some omelets for breakfast. The smell of sizzling omelets filled the cozy kitchen as Brady worked his magic, flipping them with ease in the frying pan. The aroma mixed with the lingering sense of Christmas dinner, creating a tantalizing blend that made Sylvia's stomach growl with anticipation. She knew that breakfast with Brady was always a treat, his culinary skills unmatched even in the simplest of dishes. She made her way back inside, shedding her snowy layers and joining Brady at the table. "Merry Christmas," Sylvia said. "Merry Christmas. I hope you're hungry," Brady responded, setting the plates on the table. "This smile's amazing," she exclaimed. Their omelets were a perfect combination of fluffiness, cheese, and herbs. As they sat in front of the roaring fire, they relished in each other's presence and the cozy atmosphere. They ate in silence, content with the simple enjoyment of good food and good company. After breakfast, they decided to bundle up once more and venture out into the winter wonderland surrounding the cabin. They took a leisurely walk through the snow-covered forest, hand in hand, leaving a trail of footprints behind them. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft golden light on the pristine landscape. As the afternoon wore on, they lounged on the front porch, admiring their handiwork as the snow gently blanketed the Christmas tree. By 2 o'clock, they were relaxing on the couch, sipping coffee and engaging in light-hearted conversation. When 4 o'clock struck, Brady suggested a new activity, enjoying mimosas while soaking in the hot tub and taking in the serene snowfall. It was shaping up to be the perfect, lazy day. "Great idea. Let's do it." They changed into their swimwear and mixed up 2 mimosas in champagne glasses before easing into the hot tub. "I'm glad you've let this note thing go. It could just be a prank someone is playing on you," Brady said after a few minutes of quiet. "That would be a relief, but I don't think so." "Well, like I said before, this is probably a prank. Someone who knew the note would bother you. Packard Patrician is playing a game." "That card doesn't have anything to do." Sylvia waited a minute, staring into the bubbling water. "Sylvia? What's wrong?" She sat the glass on the edge of the hot tub. Alderson. Who's that? Brady asked. It's Alderson. Bob Alderson. He's my old partner. When I quit the police force, he asked me to meet him at the old Packard plant in Detroit. Why the Packard plant? He was nervous about being seen by anyone. It's pretty empty around there, and despite what some people think, it's also relatively safe. He told me all these things about what was happening at the precinct and Derek's death investigation. Alderson wanted to tell me more, but he disappeared a few weeks later. The precinct told me he had taken a vacation, but I knew that wasn't true. Alderson wasn't the vacation type of guy. They listed him as missing, and his son began searching for him. His house remained untouched, and to my knowledge, no one has seen him since then. So you think this guy walked away, and now he's reaching out? Brady asked. Yeah. And I didn't look for him. Alderson's right. It's something I should have done, but things were hot. My buddy Charles told me to back off, and he was right. But I should have picked it back up. I did drop the case. It wasn't your case. No, Sylvia said as she stared off into the distance. But Alderson would expect me to look for him. He wasn't worth much as a partner, but he put his neck out there for me after Derek died. If he'd left things alone, he wouldn't have needed to disappear. Sounds like it was dangerous. Probably still is. Any ideas where your old partner is at? Not really. Could be tucked away in Michigan. His ex-wife lives a couple of hours away from Metro Detroit, and they were close when we were partners. Interesting. Why do you think he's contacting you now? He's ready to tell me the rest of it. This might be relevant to the internal affairs investigation. Also, he's miserable. Alderson is a homebody. He loved his little house and only traveled to work in restaurants. This guy wants to come home. Do you think that's possible? Well, yes and no. I'm sure Alderson is expecting me to fix it. This isn't something that's going to be easily resolved. I don't know what he knows, and if IA is looking for him, I have to be careful not to let them get wind that I'm helping him. Taking up the case will be dangerous, and to be honest, as much as I want justice done, I have to be careful. I'm not a cop anymore. There's no code for me, and some of these guys in IA aren't going to want to listen to me. If I go there, I run the risk of becoming a target. I don't think you should get involved in this. I agree. It's best not to get involved. That's a smart decision. We'll leave it alone for now. Sylvia sighed. She couldn't let it go. If Alderson knew something that might put the crooked cops that killed Derek behind bars, she had to find him and get the information. I'm sorry, but I have to head back to Michigan, Sylvia said, standing up and reaching for a towel. Brady shook his head. Now? It's snowing too badly right now. You'll never get off the mountain. I need to get back to the airport as soon as possible. It'll clear up soon. Maybe tomorrow. You don't understand. If there's a late flight tonight, I need to be on it, she said, rushing to dry off. You won't make it in this snow. Look for a flight tomorrow night. I'll make sure you get there. The comment shouldn't have bothered her, but it did. Sylvia didn't need anyone to make sure she got anywhere. She'd been getting herself to places since she was 14 years old. I caught a Greyhound bus to Connecticut when I left for high school. It was full of ex-cons because the bus passed by the local prison. I'm from Michigan. Sometimes they plow our streets. Other times they don't, and we're on our own. Sometimes the snow is mixed with rain and it forms hard, heavy snow that turns to ice. I can make it down the mountain. Brady ran his hands over his face in frustration. It wasn't a challenge. Look, I understand this is painful. All that stuff about your husband is terrible, and I'm really sorry about that, but I don't want you to get hurt. I think you just need to wait. And I think I need to know what happened to Derek. Sylvia. No. This isn't your decision to make. I'm going. That's it. Brady opened his mouth. Sylvia held up her hand, her palm obscuring the sight of his face. Brady nodded and got out of the hot tub. She entered the house behind him and made a beeline for her laptop. After checking flight schedules, she found one departing at 12:55 that night. She purchased a ticket and sent a text to Charles, informing him that she would be back home by morning. Brady retired to his room, and soon she could hear his soft snoring. Sylvia didn't waste any time, as she hurriedly packed her belongings, feeling guilty for leaving while he slept. But in truth, she wasn't sure if she could go through with it if he was awake and standing in front of her. She grabbed a notepad and wrote, "Sorry to leave like this. Enjoy skiing and the cabin. I'm going to pay more than half of the bill to make up for this. Please don't be mad. TTYS." A knot formed in her gut as she quickly rounded up her bags, quietly closed the front door, and prepared to drive down the mountain. Driving at that time was a terrible idea. The windshield wipers were moving as fast as they could, but the snow was relentless. Peering through a little spot near the bottom of the windshield that was free of condensation, she steered the car as best she could. Her foot hung precariously between the accelerator and the brake. She wondered if she should turn around and wait out the storm like Brady had suggested. As the car slipped and slid close to the side of the canyon mountain walls, she reminded herself of what she'd told Brady. "I can make it off the mountain," she thought. Stubbornness tempered with the desire to know as much as she could about what had happened to Derek, and led her to this point. Sylvia bit her lip, gently mashed the accelerator, and hoped that she'd make it to the bottom. She slid down the latter half of the canyon, her heart beating fast as she contemplated applying the brakes. No, just let the car coast. You'll spin out if you hit the brakes, Sylvia thought. Luckily, the road was empty. The car took over for the last steep decline, before slowing to a creeping speed. She said a quick prayer of thanks for making it to the canyon's mouth before heading to the airport. After returning the rental car, she found her departing gate and waited for the flight. Boarding the plane, she realized that she'd been a bit rash. What if Alderson didn't have any new information for her? It sounded like he wanted her to help him. Sylvia didn't owe him anything, but she liked to do the right thing. What if it wasn't Alderson? What if this was a trap? She pushed thoughts of Alderson and the what-ifs aside as she settled in for the trip. As the plane soared through the sky, her mind was consumed with thoughts of Brady. What would he say when he woke up and found her gone? He had always treated her like royalty. And yet here she was, leaving his kindness behind to embark on a potentially fruitless journey. 8. As the flight neared Michigan, Sylvia's guilt intensified. She knew she needed to make things right with Brady, and hoped he would forgive her. The moment the plane landed, she sent him a text message. "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry. I overreacted, but I didn't realize it until it was too late to turn around. I'll pay the full price for the rest of the days at the cabin." After New Year's, she'd call and offer a proper apology. Sylvia stepped off the plane a few minutes after 7 a.m. The weather was mild for December, with the temperature coming in at 35 degrees. She grabbed her luggage, rented a car, and took a moment to send a text to the last known number she had for Alderson's son, John. He responded quickly. Contacting him was going to bring pain and disappointment. He'd been waiting to hear something about his father, dead or alive, for years. She cringed at the thought of giving him hope when all she had was a hunch, a good hunch but nothing concrete. "Did you find my dad?" he asked after answering mid-ring. His voice was full of anticipation. "Hi, John. I'm calling to ask if you've heard from your dad." "No," he said. A profound disappointment emitting from the phone. "Okay. I just wanted to check. That's it." Sylvia needed to give him something. She'd called the day after Christmas, asking for information about his missing father. "I don't know what I have, but there's a lead I'm following up on. Nothing solid yet. Just checking to see if anyone close to your dad has heard from him." "Okay," Alderson's son said, sounding slightly less discouraged but still sad. A cop's son knows not to get excited about a lead. "I'll keep you posted," she told him. She rented a car and headed home. As she slowly pulled into the driveway, Sylvia surveyed the scene. The street was quiet. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Nothing looked out of the ordinary, but then again it was the day after Christmas. The college students wouldn't return until after the holiday season was over. Without them, Ypsilanti was quieter and in some areas empty. She got out and headed for the house, sprinting from the car to reduce the amount of time she spent in the cold. Sylvia fumbled with her keys, but quickly opened the door and slid inside. She immediately sensed something was off. Something was off. There was a presence in the air. Navigating cautiously through the foyer, she made her way towards her office in the basement. Silently descending the dimly lit stairs, Sylvia held her breath, praying that there wouldn't be any surprises waiting for her at the bottom. A sudden loud noise made her jump, her heart racing in her chest. "I should have been more prepared," she scolded herself. With determination, she pushed ahead and took another step, only to realize it was just the ancient furnace coming to life. Letting out a relieved sigh, she continued on to her office. Once inside, she swiftly entered the code on the gun safe and retrieved 2 firearms, one for her ankle and one for her waist. Feeling more secure now, Sylvia made her way back upstairs. The old house was filled with eerie creaks and unexplained noises, causing her to feel on edge. Her senses heightened. She cautiously made her way through the kitchen, scanning for any signs of intrusion. Finding nothing out of place, she moved into the living room and inspected the closet that Martin had mentioned. The door was slightly ajar, just as he had left it. Sylvia nudged it open with her foot and let out a sigh of relief. She hardly ever opened the closet where she stored the case files for Derek's murder and Simon's disappearance. Simon's files were neatly organized on the top shelf, while Derek's file was hidden beneath a pile of boxes on the floor tucked away behind coats. Sylvia remembered purposely placing it there to keep it safe, but as the years passed and she realized she would never have complete closure on Derek's death, she left it untouched. However, when she saw the chaotic state of the boxes in her closet, she knew someone had been searching through them. Hastily moving aside the boxes, Sylvia retrieved Derek's case file and opened it up. She scanned through her meticulous notes from countless sleepless nights spent poring over the details of the case. But one crucial note about a missing book that Derek used to write in was nowhere to be found. Derek had a peculiar habit of jotting down thoughts in code within a red notebook hidden under the mattress of their bed. Every night before he slept, he felt the need to unload the events of the day from his mind onto paper. The scribbles often seemed like gibberish to anyone else who tried to make sense of them, except for Derek himself. When he passed away, Sylvia searched for the notebook but discovered that most of its pages were missing. The answers to what happened to Derek, or at least who was involved, must have been written in that notebook, and now someone else was on the hunt for it. Without hesitation, Sylvia called Charles. "Somebody's been in my house." "Where are you now?" Charles asked. "I'm at home. Somebody's been here, and they knew about the file." "How?" "Sylvia, get out of the house. Someone might be watching and waiting for you." "I thought someone was here when I first arrived, but now I'm pretty sure I'm alone." "Okay. I'll be there in about 20 minutes. After Sylvia ended the call with Charles, she began straightening the boxes in the closet. Shifting through the files, she fought off pain and frustration. It felt like such a violation that someone had gone through her brother's and husband's case files. She slammed the door of the closet shut when she was done, brewed a pot of coffee, and called Alderson's ex-wife. She answered on the first ring. "I knew you'd call," she said. Taken aback that she had recognized her number, Sylvia waited for her to say more. "We didn't have a choice. I'm sorry to pull you into this." Alderson and Sylvia may not have always agreed, but they had a special connection. As partners, she had been to his house numerous times. Even though Alderson was already divorced from Millie, their dynamic could easily be mistaken for an estranged married couple, even by those who didn't know their past. "What is this about, Millie?" "I'm sorry about the note, but I didn't know what else to do. Alderson said you'd know it was him because you met at the Packard plant." I thought you'd like a riddle, so I included the name Patricia. Great. Where is Alderson? Come to Muskegon. Is he there? I don't have time to waste. Just tell me what I need to know. I need you to come here. I don't want my husband to know anything. Meet me downtown. Millie sent Sylvia the address of a coffee house in Muskegon. After ending the call with Millie, Sylvia called Charles. Sylvia, what's going on? It's Alderson. You think Alderson is still alive? Charles said. His voice was full of skepticism. Yeah. Remember when Alderson had me meet him at the old Packard plant? I do. What's that got to do with anything? Brady told me there was a car called the Patrician, made by Packard back in the day. I didn't think anything of it at first, but it finally clicked. Think about it. Patricia Packard. Ah, I see, Charles said. Why would he do that? It's some type of code. I think Alderson's using it because he's in trouble, and he doesn't know if someone is watching me. This is crazy. Where are you headed? Muskegon. Alderson's wife? Ex-wife? She won't tell me anything over the phone. She's behind the note, but I know he's in the background pulling strings. Be careful. This sounds like some kind of game. I don't like it at all. Charles said cautiously. You're off today, right? Yeah. I don't go back till New Year's Eve. You up for extracurricular activities? Sylvia asked. If you're getting into something, I'm in. Okay. I'm not spending much time with Millie. She's got a few minutes, and then I'll be back on the road. My hope is I'll be on my way to see Alderson. Call me as soon as you know, and Sylvia? Yes? Don't go alone. Roger that. The city of Muskegon rests along the coast of Lake Michigan, a small and unassuming place. In late December, the weather is less than ideal in Michigan and even more so in a coastal town. As Sylvia drove north, the temperature dropped and snow began to accumulate along the edges of the interstate. A small coffee shop sat atop a slight slope near the lake, and she parked her car nearby. As she approached the building, Millie stepped outside with a lit cigarette between her fingers, taking a long drag as Sylvia reached her. I'm here. Don't waste my time. It's not what you think. I don't think anything. Except that you and Alderson have information about what happened to Derek, and you've sat on it for years. Tell me how that's inaccurate. Sylvia, Millie sighed and shook her head. Her eyes were wet. We didn't withhold information because we wanted to. Look, this wasn't a choice. You know these guys. Foster threatened to kill Bob. Williamson was watching the house. You've got 5 minutes to make this interesting. Sylvia said. When he met you out in Ann Arbor at the park, they knew. Bob got home, and they were in the house waiting for him. They told him he needed to stay away from you. Bob felt like he wasn't going to be able to do that, so we made a plan for him to take off. We didn't tell John, because we didn't want him to be a target. I don't really need the backstory. Okay. Bob is in Florida. There's something he needs to tell you, but you have to go there first. I figured he wasn't in Michigan. Why is he in Florida? It's where we spent our honeymoon. We went to Miami. It was a good place for us. It's also one of the few places Bob has been outside of Michigan. He expects me to go to Florida? Why not? He's got answers. Sylvia rolled her eyes and turned as if she was walking away. Wait, Sylvia, I'm sorry. I'm nervous. Had to tell my husband a lie to get out of the house. I don't want this to come back on us. Bob got himself into a jam, but he didn't have anything to do with Derek's death. Sylvia turned to face her. The fear in her eyes told her she was ready to talk. Tell me. He wants to come home, so he's ready to give you information that'll put the guilty parties behind bars. But you've got to be the one to do it. Sylvia struggled to contain her frustration, but deep down she had always suspected this. Alderson had his own motives for reaching out to her. Why couldn't he have been truthful from the start when Derek died? Okay. I'm heading there. Give me the details. 9. Millie gave Sylvia the address where Alderson was staying in Florida. She called Charles the moment she was back in the car. You up for a trip to Florida? If we need to go there, yeah, Charles said. We do. Alderson is there, and he wants to tell me something. He's living in Miami. His ex says he's terrified and thinks only I can help him. This might get sticky. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way. Are you sure you want to do this? I only have partial truth about what happened to Derek, and there's been no justice for him. If there is any way to make these guys pay, I want that. I'm willing to risk a great deal to put my mind at ease. What if Alderson is playing a game? Why can't he just call and tell you what he has to say? Also, if he has info, he's had it for years. Why talk now? I don't know that it'll solve anything. But if I can get more of the truth, maybe I can get some resolution. You already know what happened. What do you think this is going to solve? Charles, I put this down for years. I let it go because it was dangerous. Now there's a chance I can do something to make Derek's killers pay. I've got to do this. I'm ready to pull the trigger on flight tickets. You in? Charles sighed and said, we ride at dawn. Sylvia mapped out the route to Alderson's place in Florida when she got home. After jotting down the information, she packed a bag and climbed into bed. Charles was at her house early that morning. Martin can't know, Sylvia said, climbing into the car. What are you going to tell him? For now, nothing. He thinks I'm in Utah. I'm not going to tell him anything different. What if he finds out? What are you going to say? I don't know. I hate keeping things from Martin. I want the truth. Why shouldn't Martin have the same thing? Seems hypocritical, huh? There's no guidebook for this sort of thing. I'm clear on that, but lying to Martin feels terrible. He trusts me. Sylvia said, staring out the window. This is a lot. Do you maybe want to take a step back? Take a few days to think about things? No. I need to go now. You don't have to come, but I'm going. There is no choice for me. Derek wasn't a drug addict. His death shouldn't be in vain. I was his wife, and I owe him this. If I had a lead like this regarding any other case, I would follow it to its end. You would too. You're right. I just don't know what we're walking into. Is this really Alderson? Or someone else? I think Millie's being straight with me. When we get there, I'll head in to meet him and you'll stand watch. We'll be ready. Charles sighed and shook his head. You know I have your back. Always. A few hours later, they landed in Miami. A blanket of humidity engulfed them as they stepped off the plane. Where did Alderson say he would be? Charles asked, slipping on a pair of dark sunglasses. Millie gave me the address. You familiar with the area at all? Nope. But I've got directions saved on my phone. I'll read them off while you drive. Deal. Like I said, I'm going to head in on my own. If you come with me, he might not be as forthcoming. I don't trust him. Neither do I, but I trust I can combat whatever Alderson throws my way. They rented a car and headed to Alderson's. As Charles and Sylvia drove through the familiar streets of Miami, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. The city felt different now, a heaviness lingering in the air as they neared her former partner's supposed location. Alderson's place was on the west side of Miami. The neighborhood was woven between an extended industrial park with textile factories lining the streets. His apartment was in a fourplex stucco structure tucked in between the industrial park and a strip mall. It was unassuming, and the perfect place to be if someone didn't want to be noticed. With a faded beige facade and nondescript doors and windows, the place was easy to miss, even though it was in plain view. That's it over there, Sylvia said, pointing toward the building. Charles parked on the opposite side of the street, in front of a vacant lot. The residences in the area were dated and spread out. Spaces in between the houses and apartment buildings told the story of blight and the area's gentrification. It had never been a flashy place from the looks of things, but she imagined the area had once been well kept. "What's the plan?" Charles asked. "I'm supposed to text Millie." Sylvia pulled out her phone and sent a text that simply said, "I'm here." Almost immediately, Millie responded with, "He's on his way. Stay here." "Keep your eyes open," Sylvia said, climbing out of the car. Sylvia headed across the street, carefully checking to see if any cars or pedestrians were roaming about. The street was eerily empty, and the faint hum of a textile factory filled the air. She waited near the apartment building, trying to look like she belonged. A woman with stiff blonde hair, caked makeup, and huge calves crossed the street, headed in her direction. "Patricia, at your service," Alderson said. "Alderson? What the?" "You were jealous when I walked over here. I saw it in your eyes," he said, a smirk on his face. "Yeah, the bulldog face probably attracts a lot of people. I would rib with ya if this wasn't so serious. Why are you dressed?" "Wilcox, you can never be too careful." He held out his hand for a shake. "Address is on the paper. Be careful when you let go of my hand." "I think Williamson has people watching me," Alderson whispered. They shook hands and Alderson slipped her a thin piece of paper. "Let's get inside," Alderson said, opening the flimsy screen door to the building. The hallway was dim and narrow, with 6 identical doors, 3 on both sides every few feet. Alderson's place was at the end of the hall. The light nearest to his apartment was out, giving that end of the building an ominous hue. He slipped a ring of keys from the pocket of the red skirt he was wearing. "Excuse the place," he said, pushing the door open. A worn dull gray carpet lined the small living room. The apartment was no more than 400 feet, with a Murphy bed along the back wall. A rickety bistro table with 4 black high-back chairs sat just outside of a tiny square kitchen. Sylvia couldn't imagine Alderson squeezing himself into the little space to cook. "Can you believe it's come down to this, Wilcox?" Alderson said, slipping the wig off his bald head. "I'm not here to be your pal." "Tell me what you know," Sylvia said, sitting down on a saggy brown couch that slumped low adjacent to the Murphy bed. "I need your help. They've come looking for me, and I know they'll be back. Foster wants me dead. Not sure how to get around that, but if he were in prison." "You think Foster is going to prison? Have you lost your mind? You're not going to put a cop in prison unless you've got something solid. That's the only way you get those types of results. I have something, but I'm going to need you to get the rest." "Why would I do that for you?" "Because you always do the right thing. Even when it's hard, and it'll help with Derek's case. You should have tried that when Derek died." "Sylvia, please. I know I was wrong, but we could make it all right. Just work with me. I need your help. Tell me the rest. Now." After Derek died, his mother started coming to the precinct. Initially, she was skeptical of the story. Things changed after she started stopping by to talk with Brisby and Williamson. Foster never took the time, but he's always been the action man of the 3. The other 2 are the talkers. "Starla thinks I had something to do with Derek's death?" "Not really. She accepts the suicide angle. Mostly because she dislikes you so much. It's easy to blame you for Derek's death, even if she doesn't think you directly caused it. My former mother-in-law doesn't like me. That's not important. Get to the point." "Hold on. I gotta build up to it, so you understand. She was happy to think that you did something that drove Derek off the edge, literally. Brisby told her you 2 probably had a fight. You rejected him, and he committed suicide in a panic. Derek and I had known each other since grade school. There was no way we would have ended things like that. When we split, it wasn't terrible. It was like we always knew we'd get back together. Of course, Starla wouldn't have known that because it doesn't pertain to her. She wasn't in regular contact with Derek. Yeah, from what Brisby said, it sounded like she didn't know him well. But Starla isn't a big part of this. I just told you about that because it's important to understand how those guys squashed all the suspicions she had. Alderson, what do you have for me? You've got 5 minutes. I'm trying to get to it. Who drove the car? He hesitated. Sylvia stood up and moved toward the door. No, wait. It was Foster. She slowly moved back to the chair where Alderson was sitting. Who planted the drugs? Williamson. And Healy placed the brick on the accelerator. You got it, kiddo. And now time for the most intriguing question. Why do you know this? Alderson shook his head. Retirement was so close, and I just wanted a little cushion. How did you get it? Sylvia, I called you because I wanted to make it right. I want to go home. I mean, you saw how far I went out on a limb for you. Why did you do that? I'm here trying to make things right. You want to make it right because you used information about me to set up Derek? You knew we were back together, didn't you? Syl. You told them to make it look like he's going to his estranged wife's house. Put it in another jurisdiction, where no one knows how crooked the last cops to see Derek alive actually were. All the while, you were enjoying the spoils of dirty money. I never thought. Derek was quitting. Why did they kill him? They decided Derek had to go. He was threatening to go to internal affairs. I knew he was on his way out. That's why I didn't think anything would happen. I tried to give him a hint, but nothing obvious. Guess I never thought those guys would do it. You know Healy. He's just a talker. I never thought all 3 of them would be on board with the plan, Alderson said. What did Derek know? Alderson shook his head. It's not just what he knew. It's what he had. If it had just been his word against theirs, he wouldn't have been a threat. You've got about 2 more minutes. Okay. Once you two started getting back together, he knew you would never be okay with what he was doing. I think he was going to turn himself in, along with all the information he had on the others. He had this notebook, and it had all types of records of the transactions between the dealer and the cops. He also had a phone. It was the one he used when he was undercover, so no one thought anything of it, but it was never found. Well, not by Foster, Williamson, or Healy. You have it. In a way. You're going to need to go up north. There's a cabin that belongs to Millie's brother-in-law. I didn't think they'd be able to track it back to me, because her name is different, and we're divorced, so the trail is hard to pick up. The cabin's in Petoskey, so you probably won't be able to get up there until spring. The place is really off the beaten path. There are papers. I recommend making copies before you take it in, because you're never going to see it again after that. I don't want no trouble coming to Millie, so do it in a way that they don't know it's you. Once they have it, I think they'll be able to take care of things. It's probably best that they don't know it all comes from you, because they'll trace it back to me. Also, watch out for Alex, he's the fixer. Who is Alex? A guy Foster has on a personal payroll. So do the gang leaders. He drives a gray Sebring, keeps things low-key with the older car, but he's the one who handles the deals between the cops and the gangs. Gray Sebring. Sylvia's mind flashed back to the morning before she left for Utah. The gray car that had been idling when she'd come out of the house. It had taken off as Sylvia had begun to run. She had paid little attention, but it had been a bit out of the ordinary. I think he was at my place. Waiting. He's familiar with you. A chill ran down Sylvia's spine. What do you mean? He got the information about where you lived. How they could make it look like Derek was coming to your place. He knows your face. Sylvia thought back to those last days with Derek. Fighting against the emotions welling in my throat, she tried to scan the memories with logic. Dinner, a trip to see the house he'd bought, and a drive to the lake. Alex? He was there. A gray Sebring. The last day. Sylvia's heart was racing. She needed to get as much information from Alderson as she could, and get back to Michigan immediately. Are the files there? You'll find the phone and the pages from that notebook. It's in. Glass shattered behind her, and a hot hard force whizzed by Sylvia's right earlobe. She fell to the ground, grasping her ear. Sylvia pulled her hand back and examined it. No blood. Minimal pain, but nothing serious. Alderson. Sylvia screamed, scrabbling underneath the bistro table, seeing his legs still and unmoving. Come on, buddy. Don't do this, she said, her eyes filling with tears. Sylvia pushed the table over, kept her head down, and reached up, placing her fingers on his neck. Alderson had a pulse, but blood was flowing from his head. Crawling out from underneath the table, she pulled out her phone and called 911. Sylvia continued to make her way to the door, crawling as quietly as possible. By the time she reached the hallway, Charles was rushing through the door. Sylvia. I'm safe. Alderson's hit. Get down. Charles dived to the floor, inching toward Sylvia on all fours. I called 911. Might not be a fast run in this neighborhood. We'll take him, Charles said, crawling fast past me and into the apartment. Sylvia followed. Charles ripped off his shirt and wrapped it around Alderson's head. He got grazed. Lots of blood, but he'll be okay, Charles said, fashioning a knot in the shirt. Alderson, come on. I need you to say something, Sylvia begged. Charles gently pushed her out of the way. I think he's just stunned, but we'll get him to the hospital. A few neighbors had come to the door. A young man with wide, fearful eyes said, El Despero? Ayudanos, Sylvia called to the young man. He snapped out of his shock and rushed over to help lift Alderson out of the chair. Holding his arms and legs, they moved him out of the apartment and into the car. Gracias, Sylvia said to the young man. He nodded and continued to stare at Alderson's limp body. 11. Their travel plans included 2 short layovers. Not many people were traveling to northern Michigan in the middle of December. During their second flight, Sylvia noticed her body was sore and achy. She attempted to relax and close her eyes, but her mind was too preoccupied to allow her to fall asleep. Just as she was starting to doze off, Charles nudged her. Have you talked to him? Charles asked. Sylvia opened her eyes. Who? Your friend. The one in Utah. I haven't. I know I'm in the wrong for not calling him and apologizing. I left a note telling him I'd be in touch soon. That's not like you. I have been busy. Yes, but you care more about people than that. I think you're avoiding him because you're scared. Or busy trying to get justice for my dead husband. Come on, Charles. You know how long I've waited for this. Remember when you left town after Simon disappeared? Of course. What's your point? I missed you. I'm sure your parents were sad you were gone, but you needed to leave the scene of the crime. If you hadn't, you'd probably still be searching that grove at the end of the street. I don't know what you're getting at, Sylvia said, shrugging her shoulders. Resolve the past, but don't let it steal your joy right now. I don't know how much this is going to help. Maybe something comes of this, but maybe not. Sylvia sighed and shook her head. It's scary, but who knows what the future holds. Instead of pushing him away, let him be your friend, Charles said. Sylvia sighed. He was right. She needed to make amends. I'll call him on the January 2nd. After the holidays are officially over. He'd probably like to hear from you sooner than that. The plane landed smoothly, and Sylvia gathered her belongings, feeling the weight of Charles's words heavy on her mind. As they made their way through the airport towards their connecting flight, Sylvia's resolve solidified. She needed to call Brady, even if it was uncomfortable, but now was not the time. Sylvia and Charles landed in Mackinac City in the early afternoon. A fierce wind blew across her face as they stepped off the plane. The pilot had told them a storm was forecast for the late evening. They needed to move fast, and get on the road down south as soon as possible. Okay, I'm waiting for the plan. Rent a truck, buy some snowshoes, and head in. They headed to the rental place and picked up a truck. Sylvia's phone rang just as they were getting the keys. She stared at the screen. Charles took a peek. Pick it up. You owe him that much. Nodding, Sylvia answered and said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left like that, but I can't talk right now. Just calling to make sure you're okay, Brady said in a soft, calm voice. I am. I'm in northern Michigan right now. Got to get some things done before a storm moves in. So I've only got a few hours before I'm trapped up here for a while. What you driving? Truck. Okay. Well, pick up a tow strap. You can use it if you get stuck in the snow. Just tie it to a tree and drive out. You'll need a spotter. I've got Charles with me. Oh, Brady said, sounding disappointed. It's business and he's my friend, Sylvia said. Her face warmed. Why was she explaining herself to Brady? Okay. Well, call me when you get home. Want to make sure you're safe? Sure thing, Sylvia said, noticing that her voice was determined and void of emotion. She was focused, but didn't want to hang up without Brady knowing that she was truly sorry. Hey, I'm so sorry things happened this way. I promise I'll make it up to you. And thanks for the suggestion of the tow strap. Yeah. Okay. I'll catch up with you later, Brady said, his voice sounding more optimistic. Sylvia ended the call and turned to Charles. We need something called a tow strap. What is that? Something Brady says will pull us out if we slide off the road. They headed to downtown Mackinac where they picked up supplies, snowshoes, a tow strap, cases of water, and burgers and fries from a mom-and-pop joint. After they ate, they hit the road. Petoskey is a beautiful coastal town on the shore of Lake Michigan. Huge chunks of ice floated by in the lake, and the frigid wind blew continuously. They pulled into town around 2, driving north on a state route that was little more than a sheet of ice. The conditions continued to deteriorate the further we went. Finally, she turned to Charles and said, We're going the rest of the way on foot. You sure about that? Actually, you probably should stay here. Why? You can't go alone. Stay with the truck. I won't be long. Sylvia trudged through the thick, hard snow, each step taking extra effort as her snowshoes sank into the mounds. With only a few hours of daylight left, she had to move quickly. She pushed herself to the limit, her body straining as she lifted and lowered her snowshoes with every step. Finally, she reached a small rock house covered in snow, nestled between 2 groups of pine trees. The door was flimsy and easy to open. She twisted the knob and threw her weight against it, causing it to fly open. The cabin was neat and organized and closed up for the season. No more than 400 square feet, the furnishings were sparse. Sylvia quickly scanned the space. A small wooden 2-top table sat in the eat-in kitchen. An oversized blue sofa lined the wall of the living room. Sylvia headed to the bedroom and pulled open the small chest of drawers that sat next to the bed. A box of Band-Aids, cough drops, and eye drops, but no phone or papers were present. She rummaged through the room, tossing over the chair, pulling out all the drawers, rustling through the closet and flipping the mattress. As she pushed the mattress up against the wall, she saw a bulge in the sheets. Tears welled up in Sylvia's eyes as she realized Derek had a secret second phone. She pressed the power button, a knee-jerk reaction. However, no one had used or charged the phone in years. Her heart raced as she rifled through the stack of papers. Despite Derek's use of shorthand and codes, she was certain she could decipher his notes. The columns had neat straight lines and were filled with numbers, with letters written in the far left column. W.B., Wilk A. and F. Williamson, Brisby, Alderson, and Foster and Wilcox. Sylvia closed her eyes. The sting of the truth burned in her throat. Her husband and my partner had betrayed her. Both of them had been on the take. Sylvia felt shame for not recognizing the signs of 2 dirty cops in her midst. That's it, Sylvia said, staring at it for a moment in disbelief. A wad of pages from a spiral-bound notebook wrapped around a cell phone and held together by thick plastic wrap. Sylvia recognized the handwriting immediately. After Derek's death, she'd cleaned out his apartment and found his little red, raggedy notebook. Someone had ripped out most of the pages. This was contents of that notebook. This was why he'd been killed. Sylvia knew Williamson, Foster, or Brisby could be on their way to the cabin. By now, all of them knew she'd talked to Alderson. Someone had been there in Florida to shoot Alderson, but she was sure at least one of them had figured out she was headed to the cabin. She quickly straightened the room, shoved the pages and the phone in her pocket, and headed for the door. Whoosh! Sylvia heard a bullet fly by dangerously close to her head. Reacting quickly, she jumped back into the safety of her house and slammed the door shut behind her. She had no way of knowing where the shot had come from. Suddenly, another bullet shattered through the front window, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. Sylvia dropped to the ground, crawling on her stomach towards the back door that led to the garage. With her heart racing and adrenaline pumping, she cautiously pulled out her gun and kicked open the door, hoping that no one was waiting for her inside. The garage was nothing more than a small storage shed filled with winter gear, such as skis, snowshoes, and snowmobiles. She held her gun steady towards the door, while she hurriedly searched through drawers for a set of keys. Eventually, she came across a pair that seemed to fit the snowmobile. Sylvia rushed over, stuck the key in the ignition and turned the machine on. It cranked to life after 2 tries. She hadn't been on a snowmobile in years. Sylvia crossed herself, said a brief prayer, opened the garage door and hopped on the snowmobile. As she scanned the surroundings, Sylvia noticed a silhouette approaching and a jeep parked in the distance. She cautiously accelerated the snowmobile, trying not to draw attention. The open field was a dangerous route, as her pursuer could easily take aim at her. Firing back was not an option, so she increased her speed, hoping to reach the safety of the trees before the shooter closed in on her. Sylvia was almost in the clear when a figure stepped out from behind a large pine. He was wearing large sunglasses, but she recognized the build and shape of his face. They'd been co-workers and at one time close acquaintances. Not quite friends, but almost. He lifted the gun slowly. Brisby had a clear shot. Sylvia was completely at his mercy. There weren't many choices. She mashed the accelerator and hoped Brisby would miss, but the bullet never came. Sylvia didn't take the time to look back and see what happened, but she knew the only reason she was still alive was because he changed his mind about killing her, or his weapon had jammed. Sylvia didn't look back to see if anyone was following her. Mashing the accelerator and working hard to keep the snowmobile steady, she rode between a thicket of evergreens and stopped. Only then did she look back to see if anyone had followed her. The snow was settling in the tracks the snowmobile had made, but no one was behind her. The truck wasn't too far, but it wasn't visible from where she was. Sylvia decided to go the rest of the way on foot. After trudging through the snow for 10 minutes, she arrived at the truck. Charles started the ignition when she was close, and took off before she could close the passenger door. "Did you see Brisby?" Sylvia asked. Charles looked over at her, his eyes wide. "Brisby?" "Yes. He just tried to shoot me. IA must have the goods on these guys. Let's get back downstate." As they headed back toward the interstate, a car whipped past them in the opposite direction. The only other car on the road. Identical to the car Sylvia had seen the morning before her trip. "Gray Sebring. Guess they sent the cleanup man," Charles said. "He's late. I don't think he's going to like what he finds." 12. The drive downstate was terrifying. Snow fell fast and furious, drastically reducing visibility. Charles did his best to keep the truck on the roads, but they slid off the road a few times. They were able to get back on track with the tow strap trick Brady had mentioned. The first time they got stuck, Sylvia called him, and he walked them through it. The next time, they were ready and able to get themselves out without additional instruction. Once they were closer to Ypsilanti, the roads were clear. Sylvia felt the tension in her shoulders relax, and Charles's hands were no longer tightly gripping the steering wheel. The snow turned to rain as they entered the Metro Detroit area, and by the time they got close to Sylvia's place, A cold downpour was upon them. This isn't how I planned on spending my vacation. Do you think all this is going to pay off? Charles asked. I thought going to Florida and talking with Alderson was going to put things to rest. But it didn't. Now I have to get this evidence to Internal Affairs, without anyone knowing it was me. After that, it'll probably be years before there are charges. If there are charges. Right. That's another thing. There might not be any charges. I should have just stayed in Utah and enjoyed my trip. None of this has made me feel any better. Nothing is resolved, and now I have to figure out how to move forward. Well, at least you have more information about what happened. That's actually not helpful. I already knew what happened. Not every detail, but I had the truth. Now I have evidence that shows Derek took money off the top. To get justice for him, I'll have to out his indiscretions. Part of me refused to believe that he'd taken the money. Can't pretend that's not true anymore. I guess he thought he needed to impress me or something. Nope. He just got tempted and took it. Had nothing to do with you. I wish I believed that. Regardless, I'm getting this stuff to IA. Williamson, Healy, and Foster. Damn. I can't believe they went that far, but the money has been substantial. You ought to see the new Jag Williamson has, and Healy just bought a boat. Foster moved to West Bloomfield. Another reason to not tell Martin. He'll go after them if they're on the street. I'll wait until they're arrested. Good plan. Just let him keep thinking what he's thinking. They got to Sylvia's place just after 9 that evening. Stumbling with exhaustion, Sylvia headed to her home office, made 3 sets of copies of the notebook pages, and stuck the phone in the drawer. She'd wait to deliver that in a more secure manner. We've got one more errand to run, I said. Where? Charles asked, his brow creased in confusion. I'll drive. Come on. The windshield wiper snapped back and forth, whisking away the cold raindrops. Sylvia was intently focused on the road, peering through the windshield, doing her best to stay inside the white lines. The drive was silent, but when they pulled up in front of the dilapidated building, Charles turned to Sylvia, confused. Why are you leaving it here? I don't want anyone to see me talking to Cal Wilson or exchanging this stuff. I want everyone to think that God stepped in and dropped this evidence in Cal's lap. Cal Wilson had been a good, honest detective when Sylvia worked with him, but she didn't know if things had changed over the years. Before she left the department, she'd heard he was struggling in internal affairs because he wanted to do the job right. Our old precinct. Haven't been here in years, Charles said. Sylvia nodded, feeling the emotion of the past pressing down on her heart. She'd walked these halls as a rookie cop. The precinct had closed 2 years before. The files and furniture were left behind for anyone to rummage through. This place means a lot to you, doesn't it? Charles said. Yeah, it does. She closed her eyes for a moment and steadied her mind. The past was gone. There was nothing she could do to bring Derek or her former life back. Where are we going to leave the evidence? Charles asked, breaking the silence. In a place the vandals aren't apt to be. The garage doesn't have anything in it. They won't go there. Besides, it's winter. People might come in here for shelter, but they'll be too cold to go exploring. Maybe. But Cal better get here and pick it up soon. That's why I'm keeping the phone for now. I'm sure he'll be here tonight or tomorrow morning. Cal doesn't close many cases. This is a chance for him to actually do his job without interference. After that, Sylvia called Cal. His voicemail kicked on after 1 ring. The 6th. Inside the garage, she said. Underneath the mural, Detroit's finest. You know the one. You'll find all you need. She motioned to Charles and they headed for the car. The steady rain beat loudly against the pavement and sagging exterior of the building. It's raining now, but you know how quickly things can change. Let's hope the temps hold or we'll get ice. Don't worry. I'll get us back to my place safely, Sylvia said, unlocking the doors of her Ford Taurus. I'm not worried about that, just wondering if Cal will be able to get here. It's time for justice. The weather's going to hold out until Cal can get here. They made it back to Sylvia's house around 2 that morning. Charles had driven the entire way from northern Michigan, and he was drifting out to sleep in the passenger seat of the car. Don't drive any further tonight, Sylvia said as they pulled into the driveway. Roads aren't bad. I can make it. Sleep on the couch. After a quick snack of cheese and crackers, Charles drifted off to sleep. Sylvia headed upstairs, peeled off her clothes, and took a long bath. Around 4, she climbed into bed and slept until 2 the next afternoon. Charles had left a note next to an empty coffee cup in the kitchen. Call me if you need to talk. Sylvia's cell phone buzzed while she was reading the text message. Martin and Brady had sent multiple text messages the previous night. She wasn't ready to respond to what she assumed were anxious and curious inquiries about her well-being. She tossed the phone aside. Charles had brewed coffee that morning and left it in a carafe on the counter. It was still lukewarm. Sylvia poured a cup and curled up on the couch, allowing herself to just sit motionless. Emotionally spent, she stared out the window and watched the light snow that was falling. She sat in silence, sipping her coffee for hours. Around 5 that evening, her stomach started to growl. As someone who has spent an inordinate amount of time alone, Sylvia knew how to cheer herself up. She headed to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The moment she pulled the door open, Sylvia remembered she'd left the cupboards bare before she left town. Now she had the perfect excuse to order a pizza and finish off the beers in the crisper. She'd watch It's a Wonderful Life one more time and try to rekindle some of the warm and happy feelings she'd felt while on vacation. That movie always reminded her to look at the positives in her life, which was exactly what she needed. One guy had pampered her for several days, another guy had cleared his calendar and headed to Florida on a whim to help her, and Martin had spent the days before Christmas scouring their case files. She was lucky. The house could use some repairs and rehab, but the roof didn't leak and she was warm and safe. Sylvia had her health, dedicated friends, and great memories. That was more than a lot of people had. As Sylvia was deciding which pizza joint she wanted to patronize, there was a knock on the door. She hadn't called Martin back since she'd left Utah. She'd hoped he would have waited before popping by, but maybe the company would be good. Sylvia pulled open the door to find Brady, dressed in a parka and pale blue jeans, hands full. I come in peace bearing gifts, Brady said. A cautious smile spreading across his face. You didn't have a desk-sized calendar with you, so I thought I'd get you one. I know it's past the 21st, but this might be your chance to plan out your year on New Year's Eve. That's kind of new age Y2, so I figured you'd like it. Then I figured, you'd probably have been running around too much to have time to buy any food. So I have pizza. Pesto and artichoke. Is that so? Sylvia replied, her heart fluttering fast. Yep, see, I know you. And I was thinking maybe you'd put me up for a few days, seeing as I drove all the way here. I think there are some nice hotels in Ann Arbor. Sylvia quipped, tilting her head in defiance. Brady's face turned red and his eyes widened. I'm kidding. Get in here. She pulled him through the doorway, reaching for the calendar. He stumbled into her, the pizza box keeping a fair distance between them. Brady sat the box on the floor and grabbed hold of her, slowly pulling her close to his face. Their eyes met. We better close the door. Letting all the heat out, Sylvia said awkwardly. Brady stared into her eyes. Then he moved in close, pulling her into his arms, holding her tight even as she tried to pull away. Finally, Sylvia relaxed and let the moment unfold. Frigid air filled the house, but it didn't matter. As they ended the embrace, Brady said, Did you feel? Yes, she said before he could finish. Slowly, with great caution, Sylvia leaned forward, closing her eyes. Brady, ever the gentleman, moved in close and kissed her on the forehead. As he pulled away, she said, Memento mori. Their eyes locked and slowly, with great caution, Sylvia leaned forward, closing her eyes. His lips, soft and gentle, folded between hers. The end. Continue the adventure with Road to Nowhere. Road to Nowhere, A Sylvia Wilcox Mystery Book 5. Follow me on Facebook or Patreon, you can follow for free. https://www.facebook.com/BrayleeParkinson/ https://www.patreon.com/BrayleeBParkinson. Let's get lost in stories together. Braylee. Road to Nowhere, Prologue. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon in a rural enclave of Wyoming. Abby Carter called Sarah Newman just after noon, eager to show off her new driver's license. Just minutes outside of Evanston, the windswept low desert was quiet and isolated. The unincorporated area where Sarah lived with her parents was desolate and empty. Their ranch was one of the few occupied properties in the area. Abby lived closer to town, and since she had a car and Sarah didn't, the invitation was easy to accept. Eager to enjoy the rest of the hot, dry Sunday afternoon, Sarah had headed outside and rushed down the long driveway to open the gate before heading back to the house. She'd impatiently paced on the hard, inhospitable land that made up their front yard. The beige 20-year-old Honda Accord eased into Sarah's driveway 10 minutes before 1 o'clock. First, the girls headed to a local fast food joint, Ridley's, where they ordered burgers, fries, and shakes. Sarah wasn't terribly hungry, but the thrill of being 16, having her own money, and being out with Abby inspired her to buy more food than she wanted. The girls ate outside in front of the restaurant, laughing and talking about boys and the upcoming school year. The experience was innocent and pleasant, the way a long summer day should be for teenage girls. After a few bites of their burgers, Abby stared off into the distance and said, "Let's go to Piedmont." Why? Why not? Sarah couldn't come up with a reason not to head to the local ghost town, and Abby was the driver, so why not? Sarah packed up the rest of her food and followed her friend back to the car. On the drive over, they made small talk until the speed limit increased. Abby pressed the accelerator in spurts, causing reckless laughter to fill the car. Once they hit the interstate, Abby weaved in and out of the sparse traffic, causing Sarah to let out a nervous giggle that eventually gave way to youthful outbursts. The wind howled through the valley, roaring into the open windows of the car and drowning out the girls' laughter. Exiting the interstate, the girls headed down a dirt road. The mid-July sun beat down overhead without a cloud in sight, and tall wavy stalks of brown grass flowed and waved along the edge of the road. As they moved further away from the town, nature began to take over. A lonely patch of quaking aspens sat in the midst of hard-packed, abandoned ranch land. Cattle milled across the road, causing the girls to stop and honk the horn, laughing as they waited for the cows to move out of their way. The dirt road was relatively smooth, with a rare groove or grate, and as the aged Honda Accord bounced down the dirt road, the girls sang along to a country song about boots and spurs. It was a playful summer Sunday afternoon in between the girls' 11th and 12th grade years. Neither had a care in the world. After passing the last remaining ranch in the area and heading over a steep incline, the girls spotted a car just a few miles from their destination. The dirt road ran through the low desert, twisting and turning through scrub brush, and at first the car had looked like a mirage. Coming around the edge of the dirt road, the girls saw that the old burgundy Volvo was covered in dust and the hood up was up. The vehicle, pulled to the side of the road, looked abandoned, but the girls hadn't spotted anyone on the road. Where was the driver? With nothing but scrub brush and bushes around, the girls would have noticed someone walking back toward the highway. Anyone would have stood out on the lonely road. Abby slowed the car down to a crawl, easing toward the parked vehicle. "Stop!" Sarah yelled, her voice quivering. "I think I see something." The still fingertips of a hand stretched out on the ground caught Sarah's eye. The lack of movement sent a chill through her body. "Turn around," she said, her voice steady and firm. Sarah regretted answering the phone that morning and agreeing to head out with Abby. Sarah, annoyed the car was still moving forward, reached over and grabbed the steering wheel. "I said stop. Hit the brakes and turn around." The girls stopped and sat in the car for a moment, hesitant to get out and head toward the parked vehicle. Once Sarah was out of the car, she saw what looked like still, unmoving fingers. At that point, She didn't want to go any further. "We gotta do this," Abby said, coming around the side of the car and putting her arm around Sarah's waist. Abby gripped Sarah's side hard, indicating that going to the scene was not a choice. Unsure what to do, Sarah locked her knees, refusing to move forward. Abby's hand, shaking and sweating, struggled to drag her frightened friend closer to the car. Sarah, nervous and breathing hard, began walking again, but when they got close enough to make out what the lump in the road was, Sarah pulled back. "No. I don't have to do this," she yelled. Realizing that Sarah would not continue, Abby let her go and continued, reaching down to pick up a stick from the road. She slowly eased the short branch into the lump, situated just beyond the worn threads of the front tire of the Volvo. Soft, muffled cries were coming from Sarah's mouth, but she couldn't move. The body was turned on its side, twisted at the waist, and the legs were situated in a manner that suggested the victim may have been running, trying his best to flee when he was killed. "We gotta get the cops," Sarah said, her voice full of fear. Reaching out with the stick, Abby, who was eerily calm, poked the body. Sarah broke into sobs and took off running down the road. 10. Charles and Sylvia got Alderson to the emergency room. By the time they arrived, he was moaning and asking what happened. They shuffled him into the hospital, Alderson still dressed in the red skirt and flowing blouse. A few strange looks came their way, but the nurses were there within a minute with a wheelchair and bandages. "I'm heading back with him," Sylvia told Charles. She stayed with Alderson for a moment, relaying to the nurses what had happened. When Alderson started answering the doctor's questions, she stepped out and called Millie. "Bob's been shot." "What?" "No." "What happened?" "Oh my gosh. What am I going to tell John?" "He's alive." "Maybe tell John that his father is alive and in Florida, instead of letting him think the man is missing or dead." "Listen, Millie, the bullet grazed him, but I'm curious about how anyone knew to shoot him now when I just happened to be in town." "I don't know." "How would I know?" "You think?" "Sylvia, I would never do that." "Millie, I don't believe in coincidences. I'm coming down there to help Bob. I don't have time for this conversation. Think what you want." She hung up, leading Sylvia to believe Millie hadn't set Bob or her up. That meant someone else was in the mix. Heading back towards the room where Alderson was being treated, Sylvia heard unfamiliar voices other than Alderson's and the doctor's. She walked past the room, stealing a peek out of the corner of her eye. The police were questioning Alderson. She headed back into the lobby where Charles was sitting. Sylvia walked up to him, cool and calm, and said, "Let's go." Charles got up without saying a word and followed her out of the sliding doors. "I hate to do that to them," Charles said. "So do I, but we don't know anything officially, and what we know is so outlandish we'll look crazy or suspicious sharing it. I feel guilty, but we can't let this slow us down." "Had to have been Foster." "You know, I think it was Brisby. Alderson told me Brisby has been in touch with Derek's mother." "Really?" "Yeah. At one time, they were spending time together. Brisby convinced Starla I drove Derek to suicide. She came to the precinct a few times. I thought she was actually interested in what happened to Derek." "Guess I should have known better," Charles said. "I'm sure there was some of that in her intent, but you know how it is with her. There's always something more." "True. Brisby is a good guess," Charles said as they walked out of the hospital. "How would Brisby or any of them know we were here?" "I think someone has been watching or listening to what's going on. Alderson told me a guy named Alex works as a go-between for the cops and the gangs. He drives a gray Sebring." Charles had been nodding and listening. Now he stood still, his brow creased. "A gray Sebring. You saw one of those in Ipsy right before Derek died." "I also saw it the day before I left for Utah. I thought nothing of it, but a car was out front when I headed out for a run. It took off when I came outside. I'm going to find that car when we get back, and this dude Alex," Charles said through clenched teeth. "Yeah, I'm nervous about what he knows." "I'll find him. Don't worry." "What's up with the sun?" John? He seemed genuine when I spoke to him. I think he's been in the dark all this time. The ex-wife? No. Millie's real. Put herself in danger to get the information to me. Who else knows? Sylvia thought about it for a moment. The ex-wife's husband. He knows. She says he doesn't, but think about it. Alderson has been in extensive communication with her. I'm sure he's caught on that something's up. I bet he did some digging, thinking she was having an affair and found out what was going on. Not exactly an affair, but Millie and Alderson are extremely close for being divorced. The husband could feel threatened. This could be a good way to get rid of his competition. We need to get out of town as soon as possible. We've got to make sure that Alderson is okay. I know we have to be careful, but I want to make sure he's safe. The ex is coming to town. Let's brainstorm a plan before she gets here, Sylvia said. What does this mean for Alderson's well-being? Do we tell the wife that her husband knows? Absolutely. We have no choice. Wow. This is something. What do you want to do about Alderson? I thought for a moment. Clearly his place was compromised. We need to make sure he's safe. Now that things have crossed state lines, the feds will get involved. If they do, we'll need Alderson to be alive to testify. What's the plan? I'm going to find a place for him to go. Somewhere in another state, so that he's not where they think he is. Where are you thinking? My grandma lived in a place in Alabama. It was pretty isolated. Millie could get him there in about 8 hours. Let's check for rentals online. They examined several rental sites, but the entry that caught her eye was listed on a website that focused on lost and found items. The entry said, I lost a tenant. Need to find a new one. Rural. Trailer. Call for details. No location or pictures were listed. Sylvia called the number and let the phone ring. No voicemail kicked in after 4 rings, so she was pretty sure this was a landline. After 8 rings, the phone line opened up. Yellow. Hi, I'm calling about the trailer you have for rent. Yeah. Is it still available? Yep. Okay. Where is it located? About 30 miles from Troy. Down County Road 15. You're charging $400 a month? Is that all inclusive? Yep. I'll give you 4 months deposit if you'll take me on now. The resident will be a former cop. He won't get there for a few days, but he's quiet and in need of a place to stay. The man waited a moment before saying, Name? Bob Burns. When you send in the money, I'll wire $100 now. The rest will come when he arrives. Who is this? My name's Sylvia. That's all you need to know. Choosing a different last name was a precautionary measure. Sylvia doubted Alderson would be discovered in Alabama, but it would at least slow things down if they tried to locate him. She figured a trailer out in the middle of nowhere would be a great place to hide. They were at the airport, waiting for Millie to get off the plane. She shuffled over to them, terror in her eyes. What the hell happened? How did they know? Charles and Sylvia looked at one another. Come to the car with us. No. I'm headed straight to the hospital. I need to make sure Bob's okay. Stop by our car first. You can't. Millie, we're going to the car. No, Do you want Bob to live? Of course I do. Then lower your voice and come with us. Don't keep yelling. We don't know who is watching, Sylvia said in a calm voice just above a whisper. Millie's eyes scanned the area. You think? Millie, Bob trusts me. Now I need you to do the same. If we're going to save him, we need your cooperation. She covered her face and cried. Sylvia gently placed her right hand underneath Millie's elbow and led her toward the exit. Sylvia helped ease her into the back seat of the car before closing the door. Charles and Sylvia waited for Millie's sobs to quiet. Millie, Sylvia said. I need you to listen, okay? This will not be what you want to hear, but try to stay calm. What are you? Quiet, Millie. Just listen. I think your husband set Bob up because he thinks you're having an affair. No way. No way. He'd never do that. Chris loves me, and he knows Bob and I are just friends now. Charles shook his head. You're not listening, Millie. He thought you were playing him. Chris thinks you're having an affair with Bob. How much does he know? You are wrong. Millie, the yelling is not helping. We have a situation here, and to be honest, we can't stay much longer, so you need to listen. Forget whatever is going on at his place. Just head to Alabama when he gets out of the hospital, Sylvia said. Why Alabama? He can't stay in Florida. They know where he lives. Also, there's a trailer that an owner wants to rent out. It's probably not in good shape, because he was happy to let me rent it without meeting me or having me fill out any paperwork. It's about 30 miles from Troy. It's in the middle of nowhere, so it'll be hard to find him. This is the plan, and we need you to carry it out. I've got to go back to Michigan and get the rest of this done. I need you to do exactly what we say, okay? What about Chris? Chris wants Bob dead. Sylvia, I don't. It's true. You can choose to not accept it and get Bob killed. Up to you, Millie, Charles said. Millie started to sob again. We need you on this, Millie, Sylvia said, gently touching her arm. She nodded. Okay. Where is Troy located? They gave Millie directions, left instructions for her, and headed back to the hospital. While they were sitting in the parking lot, Charles said, I know you probably want to check on him, but I've got a safer idea. Charles punched in a number on his cell and switched to speakerphone. Torres, a man said, picking up on the first ring. Hey. It's Kettering from Detroit. What's up, man? How you been? Good. Got a favor to ask. All right. Got a friend in the hospital who's in a sticky situation. Nothing illegal, just not in a good place. You see what I'm saying? Torres was quiet for a moment. He a cop? Former. Just watch his back, man. Nothing crazy, okay? Got it. Give me the details. I got you. Next, they called Millie and told her the police would be checking in. She assured Sylvia she hadn't told Chris where she was or why she was in town. She's really underestimating her husband. He totally put a hit out on Alderson. Who would he get to do that? Foster. I bet Foster ordered Williamson or Brisby to take care of it for him. Brisby is actually on vacation this week. I don't know where he went, but I bet he's somewhere around here, Charles said. I think you're right. I wonder what angle they're working back in Michigan. No idea. But we've done what we can for Alderson. Let's get out here, Charles said. Charles drove to the airport while Sylvia fought to keep her eyes open. The last few days had been a whirlwind. As her eyes fluttered with exhaustion, a thought caused her to sit up straight. What's wrong? Charles asked. We need to book a flight to Mackinac. This is the wrong time to go up there. I know, but if we don't get this information, we may never have another chance. What's up there? We're going to a cabin. Where is it? It's about 30 minutes outside of Petoskey. What type of info are we talking about? A phone with recordings and the pages from Derek's notebook. Charles nodded. Yeah. We're going. Road to Nowhere, Chapter 1. I spent the first day of summer sitting on the front porch in a rocking chair, sipping homemade lemonade and reading Encounter with the Self. A humid breeze blew across the porch as I struggled to reconcile Job's plight with what I'd been taught about the Almighty. I was wrestling with the details when Charles pulled into the driveway and headed for the porch. No, I said without looking up from the book. 25 years, Sylvia. You've got to come. Charles stepped onto the porch and towered over me, his eyes warm and pleading. Fun, Sil, Do you remember what that is? What's the point? Sil, you'll have a few laughs with the old gang. What we had back then was special. You can't deny that. Let's just have a good time. I told you I wasn't interested. I didn't believe you. Besides, everyone wants to see you and you need to get out of this house. I'm outside of the house. Come on, Sylvia. You need a night out. We're gonna head to the game, get a kosher dog, maybe a beer or two, head to the pub afterward and catch up. It'll be good for you. I know you're upset about what happened, but this will help cheer you up. Nothing happened. Sylvia, it's okay to like someone new, and it's okay to be sad if things don't work out with that new person. It's not about that. Sylvia, I know you. And then, there's the trial coming up. I know you're stressed, so let's just get out and have some fun. And if you come, I won't try to drag you out of your introvert palace for the rest of the summer. I closed the book. Who are the Tigers playing? Yankees. Give me 5, I said, heading into the house. That was how it began. I took the advice of my oldest and dearest friend, threw on a baseball cap, jeans, and a plain black t-shirt, and headed down to Comerica Park to take in a game. I care little for baseball, but the electric atmosphere of the ballpark always pulls me in. We were celebrating the fact that we'd graduated from 8th grade, 25 years ago. 10 of my former classmates made it to the game, but I sat with those I'd been closest to back in elementary school. James Green, the quiet jokester, had grown into a sharp-eyed real estate agent. Audrey Parker was living her dream of being a newscaster, covering the morning beat at a local news station. Tyrell Blake owned his own construction company that specialized in commercial real estate. After the game, the 5 of us split from the others and headed to Donovan's for a beer. So, what exactly are you doing these days, Sylvia? Tyrell asked. I hesitated before saying, I'm a private investigator. Social worker / friend / jack of all trades kind of crime solver, Charles said, lifting his beer for a toast. The crowd roared with laughter. Don't listen to him. He's just jealous because he's a crime fighter on a leash, I said, winking and clanking my mug of beer against Charles's. Another round of jeers and giggles filled the air. A lady detective. I like it, Audrey said, high-fiving me across the table. Is it lucrative? Tyrell asked. It's decent. Sometimes I don't have cases for weeks at a time, like now, but something eventually rolls in the door. It fits with my style. That's code for control freak, Charles said. We were sitting in the back of a pub on Trumbull Avenue, eating fried pickles and Irish egg rolls, sipping beers, and having a great time. Charles suggested we spend the rest of the night catching up. The group decided on an unofficial pub crawl to local haunts, with both Charles and James volunteering to be designated drivers. We giggled and reminisced about the shenanigans we'd pulled off in elementary and middle school. It was wonderful to remember the good old days and acknowledge how lucky we were to have had such a great opportunity. To our parents, I said, holding up a stein for a toast. Their sacrifices to send us to private school were not in vain. We clinked glasses and drank long, cold swigs to commemorate our gratitude. It really was a special time, Audrey said, a hint of sadness in her voice. A moment of awkward silence fell over the 5 of us, the reminder that there was a moment in our 10th year when our innocence was stolen. It was a time when the lights went out on our childhood. The first 5 years of school were great. Can't deny that, right? Tyrell said. Charles laughed first, easing the tension and sparking the rest of us to join in. Yes, those first 5 years before their classmate and my twin brother went missing had been fantastic. That night felt like old times. After the 3rd beer, things got hazy. I felt myself talking more than I should, extolling my love for being a private investigator. It was a defense mechanism. Talk about what you love to avoid bringing up what's eating you alive, the voices that had been silenced and the faces that weren't there. But these people were my tribe. Even though we hadn't all been together since our 8th grade graduation, and we'd only had a few chance meetings, they knew me. When you watch people go from toddlers to teenagers, navigating puberty, first loves, childhood emotions, and the dramatic tiffs of adolescence, you recognize them, regardless of how much time has passed. It turned out that this excursion had been precisely what I needed. Before we parted ways, James leaned across the table and said, "I'm sorry about Simon. And Derek." I nodded, and while slightly slurring my speech, I said, "I won't stop until they both have justice." The world looked better after that night. Charles had been right about me being down after what may or may not have been a growing romantic entanglement. I wasn't sure it was over, or if things could be repaired, so I'd suppressed my feelings and the desire to pick up the phone with an extremely solitary existence. Hopefully, Brady Kepler and I were still friends, and my overreaction when he asked if I wanted to move west to be closer to him hadn't ruined our connection. Confusion and guilt had pushed me into a space where I'd backed away from work and let Martin, my assistant and former brother-in-law, sit in the office and wait for clients. Meanwhile, I created minor tasks for myself at home. After that evening, I realized how pitiful I'd been. Seeing my old friends reminded me of who I was. Sylvia Wilcox would not be defeated, not by failed relationships or a decline in her work caseload. The next morning I hit the pavement around 6 and resumed my running regimen, which took me through downtown Ypsilanti, Riverside Park, and Depot Town. Back at home, I showered, got dressed, brewed a strong pot of coffee, and headed for the office. Instead of sitting around in sweats at home, organizing paperwork, I was at my desk before 8 o'clock, ready for anyone that walked through the door. Within a week of getting back to my morning routine, I still hadn't received any fresh cases. I was getting discouraged when I showed up one day in early July and had a voice message. Occasionally people call and email when they want to hire me, but the bulk of clients I get walk into my office. But during the summer, when things are slow, they're more likely to call. A familiar voice caught my attention. "Sylvia, call me when you can." It was James Green, one of the friends I'd gone to the baseball game with. His voice was calm, but when I listened to the short message a second time, I could hear the slight tinge of urgency. It didn't sound like he was calling to invite me to a barbecue. I prepared a brief speech in my head about how I don't take cases involving friends, and called him back. "Hey. Thanks for getting back to me," James said. He'd answered on the first ring. "Sure thing. How are you?" He sighed. "Well, I'm hanging in there, but I've got a problem." "What's up?" "My nephew Anson is missing." "Oh no. I'm so sorry. How long has Anson been gone?" "He left on a road trip to California last Friday. He's my brother Michael's second oldest kid. He graduated from high school a few weeks ago and decided to take a cross-country road trip. Initially, he checked in with his parents every night, but the last time they spoke to Anson was 2 days ago. The last time they spoke to Anson, he was in a little town, said he was headed out to a bar to get a bite to eat at a place called The Last Bar. He checked into a motel in Kimball, Nebraska. That's about all I know." "They talked with him before he headed out to the bar?" "Yes." "What time was that?" "My sister-in-law, Brienne, told me it was about 6 that evening. His routine was to drive about 8 hours, see the sights, and meet people." "Sounds very carefree." "Yes. Too carefree. We were worried. But he's 18. What could we say? The kid has always been outgoing and hard to keep in check." "Why was he going to California?" I asked. "Well, that's another reason we can't seem to get anyone to care about him going missing. He didn't have a reason to go to California. He just decided to get in the car and go. There are some rugged areas where Anson won't have cell phone reception. If he had car trouble or something like that, he could be stuck. Does he have survival skills?" "He was a Boy Scout, but he's also very impulsive. I can see him pulling off the side of the road to see something and wandering off without a map. He's smart but a little too trusting. I would say there's reason to be concerned. He's young and in unfamiliar territory. I don't have any cases right now, so I'll take a look. See if I can get a hold of the local law enforcement and track him down." "That would be great." Michael's called the police in the area, but they don't want to do anything yet. Yeah, it's hard to get help when adults go missing. Especially when it's a man. The town he was in might have local officers, but many of these small places rely on the state police or sheriff. That's not a bad thing in this case, because he could have driven out of that town and gotten stranded somewhere else, or stopped to see something along the way. But before I look into things, I have a few questions. Go for it. What is Anson into? He's big on old stuff. Loves ghost towns, Americana, spaghetti westerns, anything that has been forgotten he likes. So, a little town in Nebraska would speak to his heart. Exactly. That's why I'm nervous. He's young and fearless. We've all been there. Unless you had a history like mine. My twin brother had been kidnapped when we were 10. It had taught me to be overly cautious. Yeah, I guess. I just don't want to wait too long. If something has happened, I want Anson found. He could be hurt, stranded, or lost. If we can find him, then maybe we can. He trailed off, not wanting to state the obvious. Do you have the time and date that he left? I can find out. Can I stop by your office this afternoon? Working cases for acquaintances was a no-no. The disappointment of not getting the answers they so desperately needed was heartbreaking. No matter how much you do, it was never enough unless you found their loved one. James wasn't the boy's father, but he was still pretty close to the source. Sure. It'll be good to meet in person. I don't know if I can help, but I might be able to put you in touch with someone who can. That wasn't entirely true. I had some connections with other PIs, but I didn't know anyone in Nebraska. Whatever you can do would be helpful. Those were the words I dreaded. It was a nice thought, but unless I could safely bring the boy home, it would never be enough.